Let us know when you're up, Kyle.
Mm-hmm. Good to go.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Warwick School Committee special virtual meeting for Tuesday, October 6, 2020. Pursuant to Executive Order Number 20-05, issued by the Governor of the State of Rhode Island, this meeting will be conducted by electronic communication only. Members of the public wishing to access this meeting may do so at https://YOU/BE/NX-WC0Q8Q818. This time I'll call the meeting to order. And are we going into executive?
Madam Chair, there's no executive session listed on the agenda.
Okay, I didn't see any. I just wanted to make sure, Counselor. Okay, at this time, I'd ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Happy, we're glad you know the pledge.
No.
At this time, we have item B, public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment may do so by emailing written comments to publiccomment@warwickschools.org. Please submit your comments by noon of the meeting day in order to ensure receipt. Ms. Bonank.
Madam Chair, school committee members, we're going to split the comments this evening because we have quite a few. So Dr. Taylor will take half and I will take half.
Excellent.
There are a total of 46. We'll begin with this one. I am sure you are probably receiving a substantial amount of emails regarding the positive COVID test at Warwick Vets, and I would like to say that I am not surprised, and I honestly don't understand why people are surprised that this happened. This is going to happen. If you're afraid or immune compromised, keep your kids home. My child is currently a student at Vets. I was well aware when I agreed to send him there that this was a possibility. I am sure most parents who agreed to send their kids back to in-person learning were also aware that this could be a possibility. Is it sad? Yes. However, it is also to be expected. In the week that my son has been in person at Vets, he has been thriving. No behaviors, no anxieties. I have a first grader, non-special needs, who was in a co-taught classroom, who when she found out her brother was returning in person, was in tears that she would not be returning in person as well. She is falling further and further behind in reading, and no matter how much I work with her, it is becoming a daily struggle. I will not sacrifice my child's education because of fear from others. Please help our children who deserve so much more. Thank you, Luciana Ethier. I have been watching every virtual meeting of the Warwick School Committee very closely. At the beginning, this committee was making the difficult but correct decisions to keep students safe. Now I feel they are caving to outside pressure to rush the opening of the elementary schools without air purifiers. How can one depend on wind speed and direction to keep students safe? Will there be a meteorologist every day deciding if it is safe or not? There's already been a positive case at Vets and they have the appropriate HVAC system. It would be irresponsible and criminal for the committee to vote to open the elementary schools without the proper safety equipment. Will the committee be paying for the medical bills of the students that get sick? Are they prepared for the potential lawsuits for saying something is safe when in fact it is not? As a taxpayer and parent, I cannot in good conscience say the committee should put themselves in that position. Vote no and keep our students safe. Richard Buren. Dear members of the Warwick School Committee, I am writing today to express my displeasure. I can't believe you are actually considering opening up the elementary schools at this time. It was my understanding that the order of air purifiers for the elementary schools was not due to come in until the end of October. The original date for kindergarten was pushed back because that initial order had not yet arrived. Why would this committee now be considering opening up the rest of the elementary grades without these devices? That is shameful. Put the health and safety of our children first. Do not open until we have the air purifiers in place. Lucinda Conway. To the committee, it is outrageous that you would want to reopen schools without air purifiers. That is wrong. Keep our kids safe. I am a parent. I do not agree with rushing. You need to wait. Beth Field. Dear school committee members, Dr. Thornton, and members of administration, my name is Jen Goff, and I am writing to you on behalf of my son, who is a second grader at Oakland Beach Elementary. After listening to both the report and the discussion at the school committee meeting last Thursday evening, my hope that you are going to support an in-person staggered return for elementary students with middle high school to follow soon after. In my own personal experience as an educator, I have seen many issues with distance learning, and as a parent, it is not what I feel is best to instruct my child. This is nothing against any teacher who has worked hard to make distance learning work, but there is no substitution for in-person learning, no matter how hard the teacher tries behind the screen. In-person learning is the best solution we can give our kids for routine, structure, and most of all, the opportunity to make progress to make up for the COVID slide. Please give our students the in-person instruction they deserve. If the reports have shown that we can do this safely, then this should be executed as soon as possible with a full in-person plan to follow immediately, because every day our students are at home is one less day they are progressing forward. The fact of the matter is Warwick Public Schools needs to follow what all the other districts in Rhode Island are doing, and that means that our students are being instructed in their classroom with the teacher, following the state's guidelines and safety protocols, and God willing, making up for all this lost time that they did not get the instruction they so desperately need. Thank you in advance for your support on this matter. Jen Goff. Dear Dr. Thornton and members of the Warwick School Committee, I am a school nurse teacher at Robertson Elementary and have worked for the school department since 1997. I also live in Warwick, and all 4 of my children have been students in Warwick Public Schools. My youngest is in 8th grade at Winman Middle School. At this time, I felt obligated to reach out to you as a healthcare professional, parent, and employee to verbalize my concerns about the tentative plans to open schools this week. As a parent, I worry about not having the full education experience. My 13-year-old daughter is a very social person who misses her daily interaction with her teachers and peers. Although she is a good student, I know that receiving a good education is more than just doing schoolwork. It also involves all of the daily interactions that a student experiences with staff and peers in classes during after-school clubs and sporting events and school social events. Because of the pandemic, this aspect of education has been eliminated. For the past 6 months, the safety of our students and school community has been a priority over coming together as a group in school. I was proud that Warwick took a stand and stated that the schools would not return in person until safety guidelines could be implemented. As a healthcare professional, I worry about the physical effects as well as the mental health implications that this pandemic is creating for everyone. Per the National Center for Biotechnology Information, the containment measures like school and activity centers closures for long periods together expose the children and youth to the debilitating effects on educational, psychological, and developmental attainment as they experience loneliness, anxiety, and uncertainty. Compulsive use of internet gaming and social media puts them at higher risk. Children and adolescents with mental health conditions are not used to variation in the environment. Hence, there could be an exacerbation in symptoms and behavioral problems. By looking at any newspaper or listening to the news, you can witness the devastating effects that COVID-19 can have on a person and family. Again, for the past 6 months, the physical safety of our students and staff has been a priority over coming together as a group in school. However, in the past few weeks, I am alarmed at the approach the school department has taken in preparing for the return of students and staff. Dates for an opening have been released and quickly changed. Discussions and planning sessions have taken place as to what supplies are needed to protect the students, staff members, and our school nurse teachers. Unfortunately, many of these things have not been ordered or are ordered but have not yet arrived. There are no PPE supplies at our elementary buildings. These are necessary purchases and are on hold until a vote by the school department tomorrow. Many of these buildings have no health office cot because they were removed to set up the 3 buildings that are open. There is no plan that I am aware of for students to be monitored for symptoms prior to entry of the school building. There are no markings on the floors to highlight social distances. Some elementary school secretaries have plexiglass around the desk, others do not. A few of our buildings have had electrical work done. 2 of our buildings were looked at, Oakland Beach and Park, per what I read in the Beacon, and were deemed able to open because windows and doors could be opened. What about the remaining schools? What evaluation was done? As an employee of the Warwick School Department, I worry that schools will open prior to when they are ready, and we are prepared to keep our students and staff as safe as possible. I worry about my colleagues and what would happen if they are not adequately prepared, the possible effects on themselves and for family members. Therefore, I encourage our school committee and administrators to proceed forward, but to do so when the necessary PPE supplies and safety procedures are adequately in place. I understand that we need to return to in-person education at some point, but this should be done when we are ready to meet the challenges. Warwick needs to keep the cautious pace that was utilized from the beginning and stay on course to reopening when we are all better prepared. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. Sincerely, Michelle Furlong. Good evening. Can you tell me what direction, if any, you have been given about mixing these children between schools and daycares? As much as I would love my children to return, if I choose to send them back to in-person learning, they cannot go back to daycare. For our family, this is just not an option, as I am sure will be with many other families. So my kids have to suffer and continue distance learning as they watch their friends return. Is anybody worried about the mental health issues of these kids as well? Can we please get someone to share what our options are? Because I feel like our hands are tied. Stacy Richer, very concerned parent. Dear School Committee, initially I praised your decision to remain distance learning, as I agreed safety of our children, teachers, staff, and community should be at the forefront of this discussion. There is so much we still do not know about this deadly disease and its long-term health impacts. With that said, I understand many families are not in the financial position to keep their children home. However, there are families who will be keeping our children home as they have underlying health concerns that could contribute to poorer outcomes should they become ill with COVID. My frustration at this point is regarding the zero information those choosing to continue with distance learning has received. I have sent emails to my son's principal at Wyman, Dr. Thornton, and the Director of Education. The only person to respond to my inquiries was Mr. Celio. Unfortunately, no fault to his own, he couldn't answer my questions, though I do appreciate his time and response. Distance learning parents should not be waiting in limbo. We need to know how to prepare for our child's academic year. These are extremely difficult decisions being made by parents, choosing what's best for our children's educational, emotional, and social development. Parents need information to make these decisions. Further silence at this point is unacceptable and unprofessional. Sincerely, Melissa Braun. Dear Warwick School Committee and administration members, my name is Diana Wade, and I am a kindergarten teacher at Warwick Neck. You have heard from me a few times this year, but this letter is different. This time I am writing you a letter in response to what seems to be an endless supply of letters from frustrated, angry parents demanding that teachers, and I quote, go back to work, do our jobs, or my personal favorite, the ones demanding to receive my teacher salary. This letter is addressed to them. All 3 of my children have graduated from the Warwick public school system, so I cannot say I know how difficult it must be for these parents to try to juggle their own jobs, family schedules, and distance learning for their students. However, I can empathize, as I have seen many colleagues and friends try to coordinate this tricky balance. What I would like to remind these parents is the teachers are not to blame for this pandemic. We did not bring it to this country. We are not happy about it, and we are not excited about distance learning for your children. We would like nothing more than for our world to return to the way it was back in February of 2020. But at this point, we must try to change and adapt with trying to teach school safety in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. What we do ask for is a little bit of grace and empathy from you. For those of you who continue to demand my salary, Please know that I never stopped working. I have been working since the governor sent us home on March 13th, and trust me when I say that being a distance learning teacher is 100 times harder than teaching in person. Let me tell you a bit about what my job entails on a weekly basis. And if you agree to accept all these responsibilities on your own for a week without quitting, and then perhaps at that point, would you earn my salary? Those parents wondering what we do when we are not on live meets with your children and who perceive us as sitting around eating bonbons or watching Netflix, you are sadly mistaken. My time off, and I use the term loosely because it is pretty much non-existent right now, consists of many behind-the-scenes preparations. I am juggling two sides of teaching as I double plan, and by this mean I plan several live lessons for our daily Google Meets, and I am planning activities for your child to do when we are not meeting live. These include, but are not limited to, preparing craft materials for your child to have a fun activity to do during their anytime learning at home. It includes copying and organizing 2 weeks worth of hands-on work for them to do at home so they are not stuck to the screen for all 6 hours of their school day, and you do not need to come to the school as often for materials. It entails 3 times a week office hours in which I make myself available to my students' families. I spend time planning with my teaching partner. We are the ones who are putting the information into those daily schedule templates that we post for you every weekend so you know what your child's schedules will be each day. We are uploading assignments into iReady Math. We are the ones recording ourselves doing read-aloud stories and making choice board activities for them to explore during their independent learning time. I am also recording myself demonstrating login steps for various online platforms for my students' parents so they will not be frustrated that they do not know how to log in to things like Squiggle Park and iReady Math. Did I mention that we have a brand new science curriculum in kindergarten this year? So on top of rearranging lessons in our core subjects to fit an online platform like Google Classroom, I am also participating in many hours each week of professional development webinars, so I can have some idea what I am doing. We do not get the luxury that my work colleagues in the older grades have of actually going to URI and receiving hands-on training. So once again, as with many of the online platforms that I use, I am basically figuring it out on my own. We have Google Meet faculty meetings and IEP meetings to attend. These are scheduled when we are not live with your students, but I am still working behind the scenes. We have made supply kits for your students. As you know, for safety reasons, they are not allowed to share materials this year. So we have made them all 2 sets of supply kits, an ELA and math supply kit to keep at home for them to keep at home. And we made another set for each when it is their hybrid day in person. We have made 2 sets of pencil kit supplies with crayons, scissors, glue sticks, etc. We have made double name tags and folders. Please be aware that my salary went towards most of those supplies. Not to mention the cardstock, print ink, and laminating sheets used to make many of the materials inside those kits. All of the printing, cutting, laminating, and assembling those kits was done behind the scenes by me when you are under the impression that I was not working. I am sure there are many other things I am forgetting, but you get my point. Yes, you are frustrated and angry that your child is not getting the educational year you were hoping they would have. Believe me, we wish it were not this way as well. I am just asking that you please stop blaming the teachers for this situation and realize that most of us are going above and beyond for your children to try to make their year, although different, the best it can be given our circumstances. Stop bashing us and instead, maybe throw a little empathy our way as well. Sincerely, Diana Wade, Warwick Neck Kindergarten teacher. To the Warwick School Committee, our administration team, and teachers across the city, I write this letter as a mom of 2 Warwick School students, one in 3rd grade and one in kindergarten. I've heard a lot of chatter lately about how our children that are at home doing virtual learning are going to be immensely behind their in-person peers and how they just cannot possibly be learning anything. Wrong. So very wrong. I know I'm speaking in broad strokes about my fairly typical learner kindergartner, and I'm not blind to the fact that some children are absolutely struggling, but I think we do a massive disservice to the numerous teachers and administrators who are working so hard day in and day out for our students. A mere 3 weeks ago, my kindergarten kid refused to write his name in proper case, and numbers, forget about it. Over these past 3 weeks, my son has begun writing his first and last name in proper case entirely by himself. He is also writing his numbers 1 to 6 entirely by himself. When I tell you that my son has struggled with letters and numbers for quite a bit, it's not an exaggeration. Does he like Google Meets? Not so much. He tells me he misses school before the corona came, and I absolutely get that. But to say he isn't learning anything, think again. I am not here to debate the merits of in-person learning versus virtual. If I were teaching, I'd want to be in school too. I truly hope the kiddos can get back at some point because I would like nothing more than to have my son and all the kiddos experience the magic of school. I applaud each and every one of you for the continued hard work you are putting into our reopening plans, but I implore you to wait until it is absolutely safe to get our children back into their classrooms. They and their amazing teachers deserve that. Kind regards, Tana Murphy. Dear Dr. Thornton and members of the Warwick School Committee, I have been a nurse teacher in the Warwick Public Schools for 30 years and have recently been made department head of nursing. I have a few concerns about the reopening plan, which I understand is to begin this week. We all realize that keeping students and staff safe has to be our main concern. Yes, education is invaluable for students, but only if they can remain safe. According to the most recent data from the CDC, hundreds of thousands of cases in children have been reported. I worry that children may suffer from multi-system inflammatory disease, which is a condition where different body parts can become inflamed, including the heart, lungs, kidneys, brain, skin, eyes, or gastrointestinal organs. Or worse, I worry that children or staff may die. We all know that air quality, mask wearing, and social distancing are effective ways of keeping the virus at bay, and I want to thank you for making mask wearing in our schools a policy, not a choice. I also want to thank you for your valiant effort in trying to secure air purifiers and PPE for those who need it. I know it is a huge task given that every school in the country is trying to get these same supplies. It is my understanding that 2 air purifiers will be put in each of the kindergarten classrooms throughout the city before they arrive. Windows can be opened. Some elementary classroom windows are broken and can't be opened, and classroom doors can be opened to the inside corridors to help with airflow. This may be fine now, but not once it gets cold. This option may not be a possibility if the air purifiers do not arrive before our cold weather sets in. One of my concerns is for the nurses who are working to keep us all safe. The nurses' office as well as the isolation rooms need to be first in getting the air purifiers before any classrooms. Sick children and adults will be entering these rooms, and it is a known fact that this virus is airborne and is aerosolized. Without the proper air exchange, the virus can spread like wildfire. Perhaps opening 2 kindergarten classrooms in schools that have 3 and combining children into stable pods would work. Just an idea. I know it is complicated, but this could possibly free up some of the air purifiers for isolation rooms until more become available. As of right now, nurses have enough PPE to last maybe a week. A small order of 95 masks and gowns has been placed, but the masks haven't arrived yet. A large order of the PPE for nurses is on the schedule of this meeting waiting for your approval. Please approve these necessary items. When approved, ordering and receiving the items may take some time. Again, every school in the nation is trying to get these supplies. Nurses cannot safely go to work without the supplies to keep us safe. Please consider these points before making your decision about the timeline for opening the schools for hybrid learning. Please wait until we have all the PPE we need to keep us safe. Thank you for your time and all the effort you have put into all of this exhaustive planning. Sincerely, Andy Sharkey. Good evening, school committee. I am writing in regards to the vote that will be taking place as to whether to send children back to school for in-person learning. My son is a 6-year-old in first grade in the Warwick school system. We, like many others, have had a trying first few weeks of distance learning. One of the biggest battles was his assessment test these past 2 weeks. In a matter of minutes, it turned into complete chaos. I have never seen my son get so frustrated. He put his head in his shirt and gave up. It was obviously noticed by his teacher because the following day before proceeding with testing, she spoke with him about being frustrated and then encouraged him. However, the frustration level came back during testing and continued throughout the day. His attention to his classes is not there. He either zones out, gets up from his seat, or talks while the teacher speaks, asking for breaks, and I cannot fault him for doing this, as a 6-year-old should not have to sit in front of a computer screen for that many hours throughout the day. It is not realistic, and frankly, it is not fair. And having children not in school setting makes it much worse. There are too many distractions on top of everything else. I've witnessed my son have complete meltdowns, give up, and have so much anxiety due to distance learning. A 6-year-old is just beginning their years of schooling, and this should be a fun and exciting time for them. However, it has turned into a chore, and who wants to do chores? Bring these children back in person learning so the teachers can give them all the education they deserve and need. Regards, Jen McCullough. Dear school committee members, thank you for asking the administration to develop and present a plan for full in-person learning for our students. That is exactly what they need. By approving a plan for in-person learning, all families will be able to make a choice that they feel is best for their family. Not only the families will prefer distance learning. A yes vote for in-person learning assures that the students who thrive in a classroom environment will finally get the opportunities they have been needing since March. The students with IEPs will finally be serviced properly. Students with mental health problems as a result of isolation will begin to feel sane again. Students with anxiety over being on a computer will be more at ease with fewer technology days. Students who are hungry will be fed. Students who have been neglected will be noticed. A yes vote for in-person learning is a yes for students' academic, mental health, and social emotional well-being. It is also a yes for the city of Warwick. Communities thrive on strong school systems, and strong school systems are built on a foundation of putting the educational needs of children first. Thank you for requesting this vote, and thank you for your yes vote for in-person learning. Now I would like to speak directly to teachers. The Warwick teachers who my children have been working with are nothing short of amazing. They are making heroic efforts, and they deserve to be noticed for them. You are wonderful, and I appreciate you. I also care about your health and well-being. I can only imagine how stressful distance learning has been for you too. Thank you for the work that you have been doing all these months. When students return for in-person learning, I pledge that I will do everything in my power to make sure that they stay in school. I am not interested in an outbreak in our school, and no one else is either. I ask all families to be even more diligent about guidelines to keep COVID away from our schools. Teachers, we love you and we want you in school teaching our children because that is where you are at your best and it's where they are at their best. I will not take unnecessary chances. I want my child in school and I want her to stay there. Karen, David, Judy, Kyle, and Nathan, I want to let you know that my daughter was over the moon with happiness when I told her that the school committee is asking for a plan so that she can go back to school soon. As a matter of fact, when I told her, she asked me, "Can I go tomorrow?" You've never seen a 9-year-old so happy for school to start. Thank you for voting yes to bring our children back to school. It is the right decision. Any other vote will deliver a crushing blow to our school system. Thank you, Katie Mulligan. I'm a concerned parent and teacher with your proposed plan of teachers being expected to teach in person and distance learning students at the same time. Please don't underestimate the toll this will take on your staff. These distance learning students deserve to have a dedicated distance learning teacher who can focus solely on those students instead of spreading themselves thin. You can send another survey to these teachers to see who needs or wants to do DL and who prefers in person. It can be done, and it can be done correctly to give all children the education they need. I also question the decision to reopen when our circumstances haven't changed. You have all worked so hard to be one of the very few districts to do this the right and safely. Don't lose that now. Certain schools across our nation and state are having to shut down due to rise in cases or staff shortages. If we open again, please reconsider how classes will be taught. Just as a point of reference, a friend of mine has a child who is distance learner who is being live streamed into a classroom. It's about a 25-75 DL IP split. Connection at the school is a huge problem. The DL kids are getting about 1/3 the attention as the in-person kids, and the teacher is killing herself trying to make this work. Kids in DL need their own dedicated class teacher. I conclude with an article talking about how the virus is in fact airborne, which is, I'm pretty sure we already knew. A concerned teacher and parent. References the Washington Post. Dear school committee members and administration, I am a kindergarten teacher in Warwick, and I am writing to let you know that after all of the uncertainties and changes, I am ready to go back. Do I have reservations and concerns about the hybrid plan and about the safety of my students and myself? Yes. With that being said, the bond I have formed with my 19 kindergartners after only 15 days of distance learning has motivated me, even during a pandemic, to prepare for them. Some may feel as though distance learning is pointless and or useless. I am not writing to argue against that opinion. I see my virtual teaching through my own eyes and see the smiles on the little faces in front of me. The support I have from the parents at home is rare and exceptional. I am not naive to think DL is for everyone. Many of us are determined to help our students at any cost. I know firsthand the hard work and dedication it takes to be a DL teacher. It has been one of the most challenging tasks in my 18 years of teaching. My biggest concern about our transition back is the proposal that we, the in-person teachers, will continue as the DL teachers as well. This means we will live stream our day with the students that opted for distance learning. In a perfect world, I would love to continue teaching all of my current students. However, I know that this would be detrimental to their learning and hinder my ability to be an effective and efficient educator for my students. Putting us in charge of both the DL children and the hybrid students is a disservice to all of the children. Can you imagine keeping the attention of 5-year-olds on and off camera at the same time? Right now, our full attention is given to the DL students. When we transition into the hybrid plan, we will have up to 11 children in front of us. We will teach a lesson on Tuesday for Group A and then repeat that lesson on Wednesday for Group B. How will this work for the DL children? Will they be expected to listen to the same lesson 2 days in a row? Is everyone aware that the attention the DL students are receiving now cannot possibly continue if we are expected to do both hybrid and DL? How can we as educators be proficient in both if we are being split in two? Along with the reduced amount of attention, families listening at home will know every situation that occurs in class. Are we not concerned about confidentiality? There are endless situations that can occur in a classroom that should not be broadcasted. As a mom, I would not my child in a classroom that is live streamed to families at home. Besides the breach in confidentiality, how do we expect 5 and 6-year-olds to sustain their attention and focus on a lesson that is not specifically directed towards them? Small group instruction will be impossible. The DL students will suffer significantly without the direct and proficient instruction they need. The children in our classrooms will not benefit from the technology as our one and only Chromebook is being used to live stream with the children at home. We are the teachers in the trenches. We are the people holding it together while we wait for the final decision at the 11th hour. We are the experienced professionals that made distance learning happen without any guidance. Please let us have a say in what we think will be best for these children. Asking us to do both in-person teaching and distance learning will be ineffective and will not provide these young learners with the foundation they need. The push for in-person learning is evident. Why are we shortchanging them now? Give all of the students what they deserve, whether they are at home or in school. A concerned K teacher, Christine Harden. Dear school committee members, Ms. Danbrook and Dr. Thornton, I am writing to you because I am shocked at the news of possibly reopening elementary schools with an opinion from Art and Engineering without proper air filters in place. Did they go into every elementary classroom and do testing or just a select few? I only have 2 windows in my classroom that actually open. How is that supposed to provide proper ventilation of air circulation in my classroom? We're relying on windy days. What happens when we don't have a windy day? What happens in the winter when temperatures are freezing or below? We're not allowed to have our doors open due to the possibility of active shooters. Are we allowed to have them open now and forget about the safety of our students? I understand that Warwick Public Schools wants to get students back to school as soon as possible, as all the teachers do. But I feel like the consideration for everyone's well-being and safety is being compromised. How will we pull all this together in just a few days? October 8th is only 4 days away to start bringing kindergarten back into the elementary schools. Warwick Vets already has a COVID-19 case, and they actually have the proper ventilation put into place. I know that virtual learning is not ideal, but is it worth the risk to so many teachers and students to cut corners just so we can get back in the classrooms? Thank you for your assistance in this matter, Melissa Hatch. Dear members of the school committee, my name is Liz Norwalkie, and I teach first grade at Sherman Elementary. The CDC updated its guidance yesterday, October 5th, to include that transmission of COVID-19 could occur in distances greater than 6 feet. This type of transmission is more likely to occur in poorly ventilated spaces. After an email conversation with Mr. Tester and Mr. Gothberg last week, I am increasingly concerned about air quality in our schools. When the Rabbit -A2 air purifiers were purchased, it was claimed that 2 units per classroom would provide 4 4 air changes per hour, which is the suggested minimum ventilation in a room. After measuring my very average sized classroom, I found that each unit would only provide 1.2 air changes per hour each, or 2.4 air changes per hour if 2 units are installed as planned. This is only 60% of the promised 4 air changes per hour. Acknowledging that he was only using estimates of existing ventilation and underestimating the size of my classroom by over 600 square feet, Mr. Gothberg says the combination of existing ventilation and the new air purifiers in my classroom will achieve the minimum of air exchanges per hour. Again, these figures were found using estimates. Estimates he exaggerated when purchasing the air purifiers. And now we are told that we can return without these air purifiers even in place. I am assuming that there is no plan to check for adequate air quality. In the email exchange last week, I asked several times if there was a plan to test to make sure there were adequate air changes per hour, and this question was repeatedly ignored. I took this as there is no plan to check. Please correct me if I am wrong. After this conversation regarding air quality left me less than confident, I spoke with my doctor because the CDC has indicated that I am at high risk of complications from COVID-19. My doctor and I agreed that the best plan of action would be to request a 504 accommodation to continue working remotely. I requested this under the ADA. Yesterday, I was told that the accommodation may not be able to be provided, and if your doctor feels you should stay home, you could ask for a leave of absence or use your sick time. I find it unbelievable that the district would rather have me sit at home not working while there is a sub in my classroom when I am eager to continue working remotely. You will be discussing our lack of subs later tonight, so this is a very real concern that the district is telling me to take sick time rather than make an accommodation so I can continue working. When looking at the data from first grade at Sherman, for example, only 25% of parents indicated they wanted their child to return. 35% of parents indicated they wanted to continue distance learning or weren't sure. That's a total of 23 students in first grade at Sherman that either wanted to continue distance learning or weren't sure. Another 40% of parents did not answer the survey. What are the plans for students who want to continue distance learning? I am told they are to stay with the same teacher they have now. I am concerned this will be an inferior education for all students since now a teacher will have to juggle hybrid students and distance learning students. Have the numbers been looked at to see if assigning a dedicated distance learning teacher would be beneficial? This would benefit both the hybrid students and the full distance learning students, as their teachers could concentrate on them instead of spreading their attention. It would also help reduce a need for substitute teachers. I do not want to stay home, but I remain unconvinced it is safe enough for me to return. I am worried you are rushing this return. As teachers, we are told to have at least 3 days of plans ready at all times. You do not have 3 days of plans for kindergarten. Are you going to return in 2 days? Are they going to continue distance learning? We do not know. Yesterday, I sat down with my colleagues to plan next week, and we realized we can't until we know what your plans are. Please do not rush this return to school. Please let us get it right. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Liz Noraki, first grade teacher, Sherman Elementary. I am the parent of a third grade student in a co-taught classroom at Lippitt. I also live with my mother who has the rare case of being diagnosed with no less than 4 autoimmune diseases. Yes, I am aware of all the risks associated with COVID and the risks of sending my child back to school in a public setting. That being said, I still hope for an in-person opinion. My child needs it. Keeping him in a distance learning only form of education can see that the health threats I am exposing his mental health and education are far greater than the risk of COVID. We are close to a month into school now and my son has retained nothing. I've heard mention of the COVID slide. Well, I'm telling you that the COVID slide is a much worse disease. There will never be a vaccine for the COVID slide. You can't keep your distance or put on a mask to reduce the chances of COVID slide. At this point, we are no longer on a slide, but on a steep mountain, just tumbling downhill. Is COVID dangerous? Yes, but so are many other things. We teach our children the safest place for them is the backseat of a car with a seatbelt, but it doesn't stop us from putting them in a car, well knowing it is possible we could be in an accident just around the corner. We teach our children to wear a helmet or knee and elbow pads when riding a bike because they could fall, but we let them anyway. We need to teach our children to do what they can to be safe, but to go on with life anyway. Nothing can be accomplished if you are too scared to try. I'm at this point begging for my child's education. I cannot any longer sit back and let fear ruin my child's chances of a decent education. I need you to stand up and do what is right for the children of this city. I had asked one of you why, if the air filters will fix air problem and the cleaning company hired fixes the staffing problem, why are you looking only for a hybrid model return? The answer I received was it can still spread. As true as that may be, it was an answer laced with fear. I am asking you to put your fears aside and do the right thing. Send our children back to school. Connie Glittone. Good evening. I am writing to ask you to vote yes to in-person learning solution based upon the Ardent Engineering report. I understand some of you still have safety concerns with the report. However, I would encourage you to approach this temporary plan with a willingness to make this work. What are your concerns about this plan? And instead of using that as a reason to vote against it, ask yourself, how can we rectify them? I have heard many of you say we have a plan and we are sticking to it, or it's only a couple more weeks. I have heard others not say a single word about it at all, and not even respond to a single email sent to you. To be honest, it's frustrating and insulting as parents who have children struggling with distance learning to hear this. It shows that you are truly not understanding the struggles and the issues. Respectfully, none of you have children in the school system. Have any of you sat in a distance learning session of a K through 2 student? One more day our children are out of school is one more day that we are struggling to keep our children engaged and interested. I understand the enormous responsibility placed on your shoulders, and I'm not trying to minimize that. But as leaders, you are responsible for making these tough decisions and figuring out how to make it work. There are ways to make this work, and we owe it to our kids, especially those who need services and are not receiving them. To get them back to school as soon as possible, we can do this. Let's make it happen for our children who desperately need it. Laura Dillon. Dear school committee members, I have been listening to all of our school committee meetings. I will say I voted for each and every one of you because you all come from a different perspective, and you all stated that you have our children's best interests for their education in mind when making decisions. I also believe that you can think outside of the box. We need that innovation, passion, and determination now more than ever. In an epidemic, you are going to have people running around screaming that the sky is falling, or you're going to have people who say, how can I use my creativity and problem-solving ability to get my goals accomplished while being safe? I want to be on the team that has innovation and thinks outside of the box. I will say that even because we are in an epidemic, life is not standing still. Other schools districts are educating their children. We cannot keep trying to do what we did before COVID, but we can figure out other ways to teach our children in person safely, just as other school districts are doing. I know we are consistently going back and forth with the windows open for air quality. We are wasting so much time. I will say in our elementary school, the windows are always open in the winter because the heating system is overpowering. I also question why at this time do we still not have an exact number of classrooms per building that have windows or working windows. Please be more proactive. Please talk to other districts and see what they are doing. I have heard that other districts are using fans. Please be innovative in looking to ways to solve the problems. We cannot try to go back to the way we were before the virus, and I don't think the virus is going anywhere quickly, so we have to learn how to work with the virus safely. I'm a parent of 2 children in the Warwick School Department. I have a child in elementary school and a child in middle school at Betts. I feel that my 7th grader is receiving a virtual learning experience. For now, she is getting some kind of an education from her teachers through Google Meets, even though it is not at the same quality as in-person learning, but the teachers are developing relationships with their students and are trying hard to teach them under the circumstances. My daughter is liking school. However, she would much rather be back in person. I am overly concerned with the distance learning experience for my elementary schooler. Unfortunately, her learning experience is living up to the name of distance. My elementary schooler is only getting 25 minutes a day with her teacher, and that is to review the daily schedule, which consists of online activities. I would say that's pretty distant and developmentally inappropriate. Please remember that children both emotionally and developmentally regress during stressful situations, and this is too much responsibility for them. Our children need more guidance and support. I am also genuinely concerned for all the students in our elementary school. In a typical year, we have 60% of the student body at their grade level. This year, it has been estimated that our students would be 30% at grade level. So out of 300 students in a good year, 180 students are at grade level. And this year, it is estimated that 90 students will be at grade level. I am so disappointed with those statistics. I feel as a social worker, if that is what we predict, then we need to do something right now to change that, or we are being neglectful. I am very interested in having my children go back to school. I'm a social worker in a different district, which is currently back in a hybrid plan. I love going to school and seeing my children in person. I feel so guilty every time I step foot in my school that my children are not having this experience. Please put all your efforts into figuring out ways to educate our children during COVID. Our children are the true victims of this pandemic, and we need to use our leadership, creativity, and problem-solving skills to help them grow. Thank you in advance for your assistance in educating our children. Kristen DePreet. Good evening. I have a daughter entering kindergarten who has been distance learning all of this time, and I would like to comment on how fantastic her teacher has been. Distance learning has been easy to follow, and we feel our daughter is getting a great education so far. We have debated sending her in person for quite some time. After speaking with teachers, principals, and family, hearing about air purifiers are still not installed and that in our school there are only 2 helper aides for the entire school, we find this very disturbing. Kids entering schools without the proper help of all these teachers and students' needs is very concerning. Using fans, windows, and not the essential help should not be acceptable for any of our babies. With cases getting very high here in Rhode Island and schools closing all over the place due to cases in schools, I just question, are we as a city really making the right decision thus far? You are asking us to answer surveys regarding sending our babies in with almost absolutely no information in a day's time. We don't know what their day may look like, no idea how many will be in their classrooms, how many breaks they will get, etc. I ask you to please consider these decisions very carefully, as these are our babies that some of us will have to put in harm's way just to make a living these days. We need to feel secure sending our children in and that they have the highest quality of care that they can receive while they are not in our hands. Thank you, a concerned parent, Alicia Corrado. Dear school committee members, as a parent of 2 children currently in elementary school, I implore you to cease this rush to return to school. I understand that a recent poll showed 80% of parents favor a return to school. It would seem to me that the majority of those parents have no idea of the implications or the sheer magnitude of logistics that would need to be addressed in order to do so. Having served on some of those committees, I do have a good understanding of what is involved and is nothing short of a nightmare, especially if it is rushed as it currently proposed. Despite what these families may want, the most important issue at hand is that the buildings are still as unsafe today as they were when you first made the decision to return virtually. I stand by that decision and that I truly believe it was the most logical and the safest option for our children and staff too. Opening now without safety measures in place is the height of folly. What a waste of our time to go back because these changes are completed. You submitted proof to the governor and RIDE citing exactly what was unsafe about returning. If that has not changed, then why would you push for the sudden return of students en masse? Do you no longer support your own decision to have put our children's safety first? I understand that parents are pressuring you and agree that is unfair. Most parents' families have not bothered to read your reports, joined committees to figure out the logistics of in-person returns given the current state of our school buildings, CDC guidelines, federal guidelines, educational guidelines, and training for the staff. Medical guidelines outside of pandemic issues and everything else that comes with in-person returns. When asked, not many of them can answer the same question I now direct to you. What are your plans to implement the following logistics? If you push to return in days versus a more appropriate timeline? How are staff going to handle teaching? Will it be hybrid model, staff teaching simultaneously with kids at home and in class? Whose equipment will they use? And can the current technology in these old buildings handle that strain? Will there be enough time to properly train the staff in the use of the new model so that children can learn effectively? Or is it going to be chaos as usual by throwing teaching staff into situations and letting them figure it out on their own? Will the staff simply be teaching to a room of students on Chromebooks? And if so, what is the difference between being at home until safety measures are in place? How will you handle federally mandated food guidelines, breakfast and lunch to all students, and how will they time those in order to get food safe items to the students? What time will those start and end, and how much education will be done in between? If you are scheduling things like mask breaks, hand washing breaks, bathroom breaks, and food times, how much time is left for uninterrupted education? Will there be enough staff to cover the required cleanings daily? And who will assist with staff if no volunteers are allowed in buildings? To the general public, I implore you also to think this through more clearly. How can you possibly be okay with subjecting your children to this horrible illness now, when nothing has been done to try to make our buildings safer for them? Are your children worth that sacrifice? Was one student ill not enough? We need to risk everyone by rushing a process that was put into place to attempt to make it safer for all. Look at the few logistical items mentioned. There are tons more. How can we justify rushing this process simply because we parents and families are struggling with distance learning? The situation isn't ideal, but it's still safer than risking our children's lives by forcing them back into schools that are not properly prepared. Please reconsider this madness. Do not rush the situation. It can only create more issues compounded on everything else. Let's take the time to do this the right way and the safest way possible for all involved. Thank you. This is from Janice Fairborn Summers, PTO President, Robertson Elementary. Dear School Committee, we are both kindergarten teachers in the district. Last week, we spent many hours getting our classroom ready for students to return. We are excited to meet our students in person and felt safer knowing the air purifiers would be installed prior to their return. The angst of the back and forth from the prior month had lessened knowing the safety of students and staff was being considered by you in administration. Today, we write to you because the angst has returned as we are once again awaiting a last-minute decision regarding our return. Our concern centers around two major factors, safety and time. We have heard the new guidelines around air quality that Dr. Thornton received from RIDE, though we don't understand how just 3 weeks ago, Dr. Thornton stated that it was not safe to return without the purifiers installed. At that same meeting, he stated that he would not send his own children into the buildings in their current state. So we ask, what is the rush? Why can't we wait a little longer for the purifiers to be installed? Given the rise in numbers happening in our state and the increase in the test positivity rate, shouldn't we err on the side of caution? We are extremely uncomfortable returning with the idea that the windows open will make it safe. When we arrived at school this morning, our classroom was 54 degrees with the windows closed. After opening the windows for a couple of hours, it was 52 degrees. Having 5-year-olds in an uncomfortable classroom is certainly not creating an ideal learning environment. As you know, kindergarten teachers and families have had to manage many changes and possible scenarios since the end of the summer. Every kindergarten teacher we know has spent countless hours planning and preparing to best serve our young students. We have thrived to make the best of this atypical school year. Our job naturally entails a large amount of planning ahead. As of today, we still have too many unanswered questions about what reopening will look like and lack a cohesive reopening plan. If you vote to send us back to school this Thursday, we will have one day to plan for what usually takes weeks of planning. Parents also need time to plan for these changes. In order to do so, they need to be given sufficient information as well. In closing, we ask that you please reconsider the timeline of our return to school and allow teachers and families the benefit of feeling safe and prepared. Concerned kindergarten teachers, Lauren Rooney and Tracy Maracchio. Mr. Dr. Taylor.
Dear School Committee, I'm writing today to express my displeasure on how you seem to be changing how you are handling the pandemic. Warwick stood strong and made the correct decision to keep the majority of students home to keep them safe because they knew air quality was not what it needed to be. Now it seems that you are changing your minds and want to rush the elementary students back without the proper air purifiers. Stay strong and do what is right for the children. Do not open until you have those purifiers. Patricia Harrison, parent. Dear School Committee, I've been listening to all of the school committee meetings on YouTube. You have been very judicious in the reentry plans and implementing distance learning. I am appreciative of your caution and want to assure you that I see a huge improvement between last spring's emergency distance learning and this fall's plans. My first grader typically has 3 live Google Meets a day and a full schedule of learning activities. He has been receiving as excellent instruction as one can expect during distance learning. My letter today refers to the last 2 school committee meetings. I am thrilled that you are considering a safe re-entry of elementary students in a hybrid model. However, I was alarmed to hear the tentative recommendation regarding instruction for students continuing distance learning and those students learning in person. What I thought I heard is that teachers might be asked to teach both the students in person and the students at home. Really? Any person who watches elementary Google Meets or students of any age on Google Meets will conclude that that idea is untenable. Younger students learning online require substantial step-by-step direct instruction in navigating the technology. They require the content of the lesson repeated and emphasized visually by the teacher projecting his or her screen. What are the in-person learners doing while such guidance is given to the online learners? Sitting and listening? No. This idea is an unnecessary frustration for all involved and a waste of precious instructional time for all students. My expectation as a parent is that the teacher will have his or her eyes on the children in the room. The students will not be receiving instruction, but they will also need reminders to stay socially distanced, keep their masks up, and comply with other COVID-19 precautions. To expect the teachers to alternate teaching students over a webcam while alternately instructing students in the classroom is educationally unsound and unreasonable to expect from educators who are already maxed out. This plan needs to be carefully crafted and fair to all. If 17% of elementary learners opt to remain distance learning, they need to be matched with the teachers who are unable to teach in person. There needs to be a plan for students in the hybrid model that includes instruction on the days that they learn from home. I hope that you ask further questions about instruction in an elementary hybrid model. Thank you for your time and consideration. Liz Noren, parent, teacher, and department chair. So I'm very confused. The committee was waiting to open elementary schools until they got the air purifiers. Now, because another expert has come in, it is suddenly safe to open the schools without the air purifiers. Why keep changing your minds? Stick with the facts. Wait to open until you get the purifiers. Kids are doing okay learning at home. It is better than getting them sick. Don't rush into this. Bill Walsh. Dear school committee, my name is Evan, and my brother Lucas and I are students at Wyman. I am in 5th grade, and my brother is in 1st grade. Every day, my grandparents come to my house to help me and my brother with my distance learning. They are older than 70 years old. I am afraid that they will get sick if you open the schools without the air purifiers. I think distance learning is going good. My teacher is doing a good job. My brother would like school to be normal, but he wants the air purifiers. We need to keep my grandparents safe. Opening the windows is a bad idea because it does not work as well as air purifiers, and it is getting colder. If someone has corona, then the winds would blow it around the classroom. Thank you. Evan Petrovich. Dear members of the Warwick School Committee, Dr. Thornton and Ms. Stambrook, I am currently a sophomore attending Pilgrim High School. While I know the choice to employ only distance learning at the beginning of this school year has been controversial to say the least, I wanted to thank you for choosing this option. Amidst reports from around the country of COVID-19 outbreaks in both fully reopened and hybrid schools, I have felt much safer receiving my education from home. In addition, I have not felt that my quality of education has dipped since distance learning began. I can confidently say we have jumped into the content of my classes this year earlier than any other year I've attended Warwick Public Schools. I am receiving as much instruction and work as I did in person, if not more. My teachers have all been wonderful and have done as much as they could to make distance learning easier for their students. In short, I would not have asked for a better experience this year. Thank you. Emily Goldman. Dear members of the school committee and administration, thank you for your efforts in planning an in-person return to school. Warwick is finally on the right path, but it is imperative that a plan is put in place for a full 5-day return. Even if the district does not act on this immediately, plausible solutions need to be identified, such as the number of children that require transportation. For instance, a survey for families will help determine busing allocation. The administration should be held responsible for implementing a full 5-day in-person plan. As we experienced with recommendations such as air purifiers and variable wind ventilation from experts, safety measures need a lead time, so a full in-person plan needs to be in place before it is ready for green light. Recent surveys and letters show the majority of Warwick families have expressed that distance learning isn't adequate. Although positive COVID cases will continue to pop up in our community and in others around us, children cannot continue to sit at home. In-person learning cannot be interrupted if proper mitigation is in place. My family continues to be diligent to keep teachers and classmates safe. My child wants to be in school and should be given a choice for full in-person learning as in other districts. I know you do not need reminding about how behind children are in their academic progress since last spring. Their social and emotional well-being is continuing to decline. You know this from the heartbreaking stories that you've been hearing and seeing from parents and teachers in the last several weeks. Tech issues are also a problem. It is clear that distance learning is not a proper substitute for the classroom. The time spent on rescinding votes causes even more delays for in-person learning, which has far greater implications on our children. Please do not delay school reopening. It is October. Children desperately need to get back to school in person. They deserve a quality education. The goal is very clear. Plan for a full in-person return to school for 5 days a week. Sincerely, Maya Sherman. To members of the Warwick School Committee, I would like an explanation why there has been no discussion regarding high school students returning to school. In my opinion, the last 4 years of a child's education is most important as it prepares them to go out into the real world. Why are our high school age students being ignored? If you really think that high school students are succeeding with the abridged hours of distance learning, you are sadly mistaken. No school Mondays. Classes done at 9:43 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's an absolute joke how the distance learning schedule is considered enough for any students. I can speak for many other Warwick parents out there. We've had enough. Do your jobs and get all Warwick students back to school in person. Our children's futures depend on it. Thank you, Jennifer Kane. I believe it is very dangerous and too risky to open up a school without proper ventilation or air filtration at these trying times. I would hope that pressure from the governor would not affect your decision one way or the other to unsafely open schools. Sincerely, Peter L. Stone. To the Warwick Public School Committee. As a parent of a kindergartner and second grader, I urge you to start the opening of Warwick Public Schools. Another day of virtual learning means another day our children will be academically behind. Today, while my daughter was on her morning meeting, she was asked to locate a page in the glossary of a reading book. I watched from the kitchen as she blankly stared at the screen, completely zoned out, as her teacher gave step-by-step directions on how to find the particular page. Since starred for a few, about another minute as her teacher carried on with class, and then she started screaming for me that she needed help because she realized the class had found the page that she was lost. Reread that. She was lost. First thing in the morning, trying to find a page in the book. It's painful to watch these kids zone out while staring at the screens time and time again, without a care in the world unless her name is called to answer a question. It's extremely difficult for her to pay attention with a computer screen in her face and no actual physical classmates or teach around. On her next 11 meeting for math help, I spotted her drawing a picture. I asked her if it was art class today, and she replied, "No, it's math." It pains me to see my smart, friendly, and fun second grader has absolutely not a wink of interest in her schoolwork. They've got phenomenal teachers who constantly offer extra help, thank goodness, and we as a family are grateful for that. It's impossible for me to sit through her days of lessons because my kindergartner also needs his hands held the entire day with his work. When I heard there was a possibility of some folks voting no to reopen schools, I was baffled. I have so many questions. One, do folks voting no or contemplating it actually have school-age children at home conducting virtual learning? Two, if not, have you sat in to witness how awful it is to watch a child struggle to learn every single day? Three, if the overwhelming majority of 79% of Warwick families are ready to go back, why can't we simply allow those who are not ready to remain home with a VL option? This list goes on. Both of my children's moods have changed, their behavior habits, patient level, and emotions are taking a massive toll. From the bottom of my heart, it hurts me to say that my children are losing interest big time with their education. My husband and I both have a bachelor's degree, and he's about to receive a master's. Education is important to us. We truly feel our child-parent relationship are being negatively affected as their relationships with love for a school. They belong here. They belong there. It's unfair to families, but more importantly, it's unfair to the future of our own children. Thank you for your time, Alexandra Morris, Warwick mother of 2 struggling kids. Dear members of the school committee, I have been following the school committee meetings closely, and I have to admit that I am upset with the most recent developments. I am amazed that you are even considering opening up the elementary schools without having the air purifiers in place. That to me seems short-sighted and dangerous. Both of my boys are students at Wyman. I will not even consider sending them back until appropriate safety measures are put in place. Look what has already happened at vets with the HVAC system that was just installed. Only 4 days with students and already a member of the new vets community has contracted COVID. How many people was it spread to? I thought the committee was so brave to stand up to the governor and the outside pressure to just open a window and get the kids into school. Please continue on your path of doing what is right for our students and staff and wait until we have what we need in place to open safely. Thank you. Meredith McSwiggan, special educator, vets, parent, taxpayer, voter. Dear school committee, my wife is a teaching assistant currently working at Warwick Veterans. There has been the first positive test result at that school. The students were only in the building for 4 days. Veterans has the HVAC system that is supposed to help keep people safe. How can you think about opening elementary schools without air purifiers? At the beginning of COVID, the school committee was making the right decision to keep the students and staff safe. Rushing to open the elementary schools is not in the best interest of the students or staff. My wife usually works at Oakland Beach. This committee has a responsibility to keep her and the students there safe. Make the right decision and do not open schools until you have the correct equipment. David Kroll. Good evening. I am writing to express my concerns as you begin to think about reopening schools. I understand that there are pros and cons to this whole situation. Understand that whichever way the vote happens to go, there are going to be upset parents. With that being said, I'm asking that you keep the health and safety of the children and school staff in mind. Just 2 short months ago, the Warwick School Committee took a vote to begin the year with distance learning. This vote was taken with the health and safety of our children and staff in mind. At that time, the concern was proper ventilation, yet we are voting today to send children into the same building which still are facing the same problem, ventilation. The students still will not have the proper ventilation as the filters which were ordered are now on back order. My question to you is, what has changed? How is it now safe? Over the past several years, safety has been a top priority within our schools. Children have practiced lockdown drills, shelter in place, as well as evacuations in the event that an intruder enters the building through securely locked interior and exterior doors. As we look to open our schools, safety is no longer a priority. Recommendations are that interior and exterior doors and windows are open to ensure proper airflow for the virus. Although this may keep the virus out, we leaving our children open to a possible physical harm. My question to you is, what has changed? How is it now safe? There is much talk about how children need for school socialization. How is this going to happen when children are required to remain 6 feet apart? Children, especially young children, cannot be expected to stay 6 feet apart from everyone else during an entire school day. Even if school has the room, it's just not going to happen. One adult can't keep eyes on all children every second of every hour of every day to ensure they don't drift into each other's spaces while making sure they are wearing their PPE properly. You certainly can't do that and teach. Young children are simply not developmentally able to remember to keep themselves distanced from their friend who they have come to school to socialize with. I would like to end by thanking the Warwick school teachers for all of their effort in making sure that distance learning is successful. I feel teachers have gone above and beyond to ensure students are receiving a quality education while they continue to build positive relationships with students and families. When voting tonight, I'm asking you please keep the safety and well-being of students and staff as #1 priority. Sincerely, a concerned parent. I have a senior in high school. Once an outgoing, lively person, now stays in her room 90% of the time. This is an important time in her life. Peer relationships are important for teens. In-person creates healthy social lives and helps with mental health. Not only is she suffering emotionally, but also physically and educationally. These are long-term issues. Our children deserve better than distance learning. Our children deserve the best education, and that's in person. Let our children go back. Patricia Staples. Dear Dr. Thornton and members of the school committee, I knew that my last letter would not be my last to you. Smiley face. I am writing to you in reference to your vote to take place today. I am so glad it seems that we can have our children return in a safe way. Day-to-day is still very frustrating and never an ending struggle waiting for the solution to come to fruition. My daughter, again, is a first grader at Norwood and on the autism spectrum. She is in a co-taught classroom with several others that have IEPs. She has regressed and continues to regress every day despite valiant efforts from her teachers. I also worry about teachers, as well as many are working harder with less success and progress with these children and much frustration. As much as I am happy that we are heading in the right direction, I am still troubled. I feel that with a permanent solution so close that a staggered return separated by a week or two to slowly build up to full in-person learning should be achievable sooner rather than later. This model is being used successfully by other districts. I feel that a hybrid model will not provide that much protection and be more hassle than it's worth. Many parents in the district have multiple children in the school system, and having to contend with one child in a pod A and another in pod B, etc., may even be more stressful. It may also result in more exposure to families because different children may be in childcare different days. Also, teachers are being exposed to both sets of children, so there's still potential for cross-transmission. Slow and steady pods with routine may be a better alternative. Hopefully, any spread should be significantly low with spacing and masking guidelines being followed. I also think that after being left behind and out of routine with the so-called COVID gap for so long, these children are going to have to work twice as hard to regain all that has been lost. Going back at least 4 days should be the choice. There's 75 to 80% of children returning, so hopefully logistically this is possible. Also, I was wondering how many hours a day the children would be in class. I don't remember hearing that figure. Please help us get back to some sense of normalcy in a safe way. Thank you for all your efforts. Sincerely, Sarah Just Salisbury. School committee. Please start in-person learning as soon as possible. Remote learning is not working. This most recent survey has shown that the parents in the district want to send their children back to school for in-person learning. Those parents who wish to keep their children home and continue to homeschool have that option. The parents who wish to send their children to school for in-person learning are begging for the option to do so. The goal of the school committee needs to be sure to make sure that the children in our district achieve educational success. Let the Warwick Police Department and the school administrators work together on the security of the schools. I'm confident that the security of the children in this district is a top priority of the Warwick Police Department, and they will put great effort into ensuring their safety. Please do not let this be an issue with reopening the schools. School districts around the state are making it work. Once the district starts the process of reopening, please start the process of expanding to a minimum 4 days a week of in-person learning for the elementary age students. Remote learning does not work for this age group. The Every Student Succeeds Act replaced the No Child Left Behind Act in 2015. The act was put into place to ensure that the children in this country receive a quality and equal education. The Warwick School Committee is in the position to make sure this federal act is followed. I am confident that every student in the district is not currently receiving or being offered an equal and quality education through remote learning. Please do not leave our children behind the rest of the state when it comes to their educational needs. Thank you for your time, Brian Morse. Dear Dr. Thornton and members of the Warwick School Committee, we are dedicated teachers and staff at Robertson Elementary School. We love our jobs and miss our students very much. Distance learning is not ideal or what we ever imagined ourselves doing, but we're all working countless hours to make it work. For the past 6 months, Warwick Schools has made the safety of our students and the school community a priority over coming together as a group in school. We have been proud that Warwick took a stand and stated that the schools would not return to in-person until safety guidelines could be implemented. At that time, things seemed to be moving quickly, but we are not clear on what conditions have changed to hasten reopening. A reopening that we feel does not address the safety considerations that have been a priority until now. Our biggest fear is that these safety measures will not be in place, but parents will be trusting that they are, and that teachers will be able to keep their children safe. We are writing to you today with concerns about the reopening plan for Warwick's elementary schools. There are many unanswered questions, and we wonder if members of the school committee and parents realize this. First and foremost, we want to feel comfortable that students return safely. We are not scared, but we are very concerned. Some of our questions are highlighted below. Health and safety concerns: will we truly be ready in 2 days? Custodial staff has not been secured. At this point, our school has only one custodian, which leaves at 3 p.m. Custodians will need to clean each classroom after snack and lunch, clean each bathroom after each class or an individual uses it, and clean the classroom at the end of the day. How can one person do that? What is the plan for arrival and dismissal? It has not been fully developed, as we do not know the staffing we will have to assist us yet. What are the specifics of mask breaks, especially during inclement weather? How many building aides have actually been hired for every building? We have heard that enough building aides have not been secured in many aspects of the day required of building aid, including but not limited to student arrival, lunch recess, and dismissal. When are the teachers and staff going to receive necessary training in order to be able to teach safely in a COVID environment? There is no training protocol in place. We are underprepared for the new challenge of hybrid instruction. What happens during inclement weather with regards to cleaning while students are in the classroom? For example, after lunch or after snack or arrival and dismissal. When will the PPE arrive? Will they be here in less than 2 days? When will we have functioning water fountains? When will plexiglass shields arrive for teachers to use with one-to-one student work? Why are there no barriers planned for around student seating areas? Air purifiers have not yet been installed. Why is it now okay to open without purifiers? Academic concerns. Will we be truly ready in 2 days? On Mondays, how are we supposed to balance assisting students with distance learning, participating in professional development, and planning appropriate lessons? When will we provide proper technology such as cameras? Are we expected to use our only computer to be on our live sessions as well as hook the same computer up to our Elmo to present in-class lessons? Who will teach the students who elect full distance learning? Are they expected to tune in and watch a video of the class all day? Who will answer their questions? Families need to be made aware. Hand washing break, mask breaks, breakfast in class for everyone. All of those procedures take away from teaching and learning. Will we have the staff in place to do this safely? Who will inform them of the timeline for having everything we need to open safely? If expected to teach in person and connect with students at home through a live meet, how do we account for privacy? What if a parent does not want a child to be on camera? We want nothing more than to teach our children in person. It is the best situation. But this is a pandemic, and return to in-person learning needs to be done in a manner that's safe for all involved. Please do not rush this. The details need to be in place, or it is a plan destined to fail. Regards, Robertson teachers and staff. Dear members of the Warwick School Committee, I am writing you to urge you to not follow the administration's newly released plans to immediately bring students into the elementary schools. You need to stick to your vote to reopen the schools when you get the air purifiers. The current timeline to start kindergarten in person on this Thursday with only 1 day to prepare, and then in rapid succession put grades 1 through 5 and only half of the grade 6 students back into schools is hurried and ill-conceived and conveys the lack of respect for students, teachers, and parents. This rush to suddenly populate the schools will not allow for the proper logistical or instructional preparations. Furthermore, at Friday's school committee meeting, the suggestion that elementary teachers would live stream their classes for students who had opted for virtual learning showed a lack of understanding of good educational practices. Last week, you heard from frustrated parents who want their children in school at any cost. Although these comments may be driving the administration to now conveniently ignore some of its earlier statements about bringing students back into the buildings, the constant fluctuations in plans, particularly for kindergarten, are leaving teachers feeling devalued, demeaned, and disrespected. All Wowwick teachers have been working diligently and ceaselessly to do their jobs during this pandemic. Providing instruction takes planning. What is happening right now shows a lack of planning, and you need to reject the timeline that the administration promulgated late on Friday afternoon. Until recently, you have been making reasonable decisions about virtual or in-person learning for students in Warwick. In August, when the superintendent informed you that based on guidance from an expert that the Rhode Island Department of Education had hired, the majority of Warwick school buildings would not be safe for students. You voted to begin the year with virtual learning. When the superintendent further informed you that Warwick did have 3 buildings that could provide proper fresh air exchange rate, you voted to use those 3 buildings to provide in-person instruction to special populations of students. However, before the students entered the building, the teachers who were to teach those buildings had orientation time in the buildings before the students arrived. Today is October 6th. The administration wants kindergarten to begin on October 8th and wants you to vote to do so tonight. How can you expect the teachers to be ready to teach with only one day to prepare before the students arrive? Teachers can't just flip a switch from virtual to in-person instruction. How can you expect the buildings themselves to be ready in just one day? You have redeployed the custodial staff to Vets, Drumrock, and the Career and Technical Center. The custodians can't just flip a switch either. Next, the administration scheme includes bringing grades 1 through 5 back into the building next week. This part of the plan may even more insane than bringing the kindergarten back too soon. At least the kindergarten teachers knew they would be returning because the air purifiers were supposed to be arriving, and plus the administration has been jerking them around for weeks. However, the rest of the elementary teachers only learned via a district email on Friday, October 2nd at 3:32 p.m. They would be expected to switch from virtual instruction to in-person instruction in a week. I know I'm repeating myself, but this haste conveys a lack of understanding of educational practice and reveals a total lack of respect for the teachers who will have to switch from creating virtual learning plans to in-person instruction plans and will have to make their own child care or elder care provisions in a very short period of time. In addition to the logistical nightmare that this impetuous decision would cause, there is an educational disaster looming because the administration now wants teachers to both teach virtually and in person. At the school committee meeting on October 2nd, there was some talk that the elementary teachers would live stream lessons for those students who would continue to receive virtual instruction. I hope that the live streaming idea was a mistake because teachers are not going to do so. First, the district does not have the technology for a teacher to live stream a class. Secondly, if we can't expect students to sit in front of a screen all day during the virtual learning that is now occurring, how can we expect students to watch a live stream class all day? Additionally, how can students at home even see through a tiny screen what is happening in the classroom? Most significantly, there may be privacy issues that no one has considered. Other districts are attempting to live stream and the results have been poor. Wowwick should not duplicate this mistake. Furthermore, teachers should not have to be responsible for creating even more multiple lessons for the same subject they are teaching. The hybrid model will already require multiple plans. If students are going to return to school in the hybrid model, then teachers will have half of the class in school one day and the other half in school on the next. Already, there will be a need for teachers to plan for what the at-home students will be doing while the in-person students are learning in school. Teachers cannot be expected to also plan special instruction for a third group of students, those who would be only learning virtually. Furthermore, if teachers were teaching both in person and virtually, the virtual instruction would be very different than what it is now and would not be as effective. Teachers may have to ignore the students in the front of them to work on technological issues with the students online or vice versa. Frequently, elementary teachers have to talk students through using computer. Therefore, students whose parents have chosen virtual learning for them should have teachers who only have virtual students in their classes. The special education programs at Vets have teachers teaching either in person or virtually. This model needs to be duplicated at the elementary level and eventually at the secondary level. The secondary schools can even open in their current conditions. Due to the underlying health conditions, some teachers will not be able to enter the school buildings, but they can still teach virtually. For virtual learning to continue to be effective, the entire class, including the teacher, should be virtual. Some districts, such as West Warwick, have successfully scheduled virtual learning only classes and prevented the in-person and virtual debacle that other districts are experiencing. Scheduling these new virtual classes and planning for a hybrid return will take more than one day, tomorrow, to accomplish. Do not follow the administration's newly concocted and irrational timeline and instruct the administration to create virtual learning only classes for those students who request them and for those teachers who need to teach them. The administration also wants you to vote to bring back into school buildings only half of the sixth grade students in Warwick. Because there may be some room at Vets, the administration wants you to vote to have the grade 6 vet students return to Vets. However, because Windman has windowless classrooms and a non-functioning ventilation system, students cannot currently return to Windman. Therefore, the administration wants you to vote to create an unfair and inequitable educational situation. I can hear Dave Teston now. He's going to say, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. However, will it be fair to or good for women grade 6 students if they have to remain virtual, while vets grade 6 students will have the option to be virtual or in person? I know this has been a very lengthy letter. However, I wanted you to understand what the administration is asking you to do will be disastrous. You need to continue with your vote to bring the students back into the schools when the air purifiers arrive and the electrical work has been completed. You need to banish all thought of live streaming since it's not working in other districts. You need to let Warwick form its own virtual learning option with teachers dedicated solely to virtual learning and remove additional work from teachers who will be teaching in person in the hybrid model. You need to tell your administration to stop jerking students, teachers, and parents around. You have made some very good decisions, but lately you have followed the administration to act willy-nilly, and the result has been commotion and chaos. If everyone is concerned about the social and emotional health of human beings, both of the children and the adults in the school buildings, as past public comment has indicated, then you must vote against the administration's new timeline and stick with the previous air purifier plan, which you already voted, in which everyone has been prepared. Thank you. Sincerely, Darlene Netco, Wowwick Teachers Union President. Hi, my name is Amy Marquis, and I have 2 daughters at Wyman Elementary School and 1 daughter at Betts Middle School. I feel very strongly that you should vote yes to send the kids back to school, not just for educational purposes, but for social emotional skills. My girls are great, but they are struggling to essentially learn from a computer every day with only a half-hour interaction with a teacher per day. And I feel much more of this, they are going to fall even further behind. I urge you to please vote yes tonight. Thank you, Amy Marquis. Dear school committee members, I am writing this email today to implore you to vote to bring our children back into the classroom. You have already heard from many parents about how miserably distance learning is going. And the result of the survey circulated to Warwick parents showed around 80% of us intend to send their children back to school. This should tell you everything you need to know about your next step. So it is imperative you take that next step and bring kids back. I also support the timeline outlined in the email to parents dated October 2nd. While I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Testa's assessment that the overall goal should be full in-person learning, I think a staggered start using the hybrid model makes sense. There are also many questions to be answered, particularly for those who opt to continue with distance learning. What's most important at this point is to agree some sort of in-person learning should be brought back. In closing, please allow me to say that I know your hearts are in the right place. You don't want to deliberately put our children into harm's way. And from the bottom of my heart, I do appreciate that truly. However, you have to understand that I too have considered the risks to sending my children back, and they need in-person learning. I know that sending my kids back to learn in a classroom is the right thing to do for my family. The majority of the community clearly agrees, and I think that you should put more faith into that fact. So please, do the right thing and vote to bring our children back to the classroom. Thank you for your consideration. Sarah Neal. Dear school committee members and Warwick administration, my name is Patricia Gagnon, and I currently have 2 children enrolled in Warwick Public Schools. My oldest daughter, Sophie, is medically fragile, has an IEP, and is in self-contained classroom. My other daughter, Lucy, is in 3rd grade at her home school, Norwood Elementary. I first wanted to start off by saying that I am sure you've heard a lot of complaints from parents regarding the distance learning situation. But I wanted to let you know that distance learning is not a failure for everyone in the school system. My daughter, Sophie, was eligible to attend school at Betts, and we chose to keep her home due to health reasons. Both of my daughters are currently thriving academically, and I feel that the teachers in both of my daughters' classrooms are doing an amazing job. I also wanted to address the survey that was sent out to parents this past week to allow us to opt into in-person learning. I feel that sending this survey and asking parents to complete this within days was fairly inconsiderate. The administration failed to provide full transparency or scope as to how this survey will be used and provide little time for the decision to be discussed amongst families. In addition, we were given no information on how in-person learning was to take place. And while my oldest will remain home regardless of the decision you make, there are several factors my family and I need to consider before we send my third grader back to in-person learning. Information we need to make this decision include the following. What days will my child be attending school under this hybrid plan? Will my child be eligible for busing? How is busing eligibility determined? Will masks be required in the classroom? If we choose distance learning, will my child get a new teacher? While I did as I was asked, I want you all to know that what was filled out on the survey was by no means my final decision. And prior to asking parents to make a decision like this, the above mentioned information should have been included. Lastly, I wanted to address the report provided by Art and Engineering. My understanding was that the original evaluation determined that most schools would need a significant update to current HVAC systems or installation of air purifiers in all classrooms. Has this been completed? If it has not, why should we believe what is written in the report if we have been told for over a month that schools in Warwick are currently unsafe for in-person learning? If they are deemed safe now, why are they not deemed safe in August? What has changed between now and August that makes the school safe? Thank you, Patricia Gagnon. Dear Warwick School Committee members, I am writing to express my strong desire for our elementary students to return to school for hybrid learning. As a parent of 3 school-age children, I have considered all of the risks involved, weighed positives and negatives, and followed all of the updates and the newest data on COVID-19. I do not take this decision or vote tonight lightly, but I have found over the past 7 months that my own kids have suffered both educationally and emotionally from not having in-person instruction, interactions, and relationships with other students and staff in their schools. I have witnessed an increase in overall anxiety in each of my children as well. I feel strongly we should make every effort to get our students back to school as much and as safely as possible this year. My kids have been fortunate that as a school teacher, I have been home often to monitor and help with their distance learning. But I cannot be available at all times, like most other parents. The obstacles and hurdles we have all faced as parents of school-aged children have been incredibly difficult. And I have no doubt that all of Warwick students have already paid a deep learning and educational price for not being able to attend school. Furthermore, there is no way the needs of our most vulnerable student population are being met learning remotely from home. I feel very strongly that our Warwick students need to go back to school before any more quality instruction, learning, and experiences are lost for them. Now is the time to vote for a return to school. It has been done safely and successfully in other communities, and I believe it can be done here in Warwick. So I'm urging the committee to vote for our elementary students to go back for hybrid learning. This is a big step for our children, and I strongly believe it is the absolute right decision to make at this time. Sincerely, Mike Marquis. Dear Warwick School Committee, I am concerned with the vote that is happening tonight to send grades K through 5 back to in-person learning, a hybrid model. First and foremost, I'd like to point out that this vote that you take tonight will determine if my 6-year-old daughter goes back to school this Friday, October 9th. That is only 2 full days away. I have zero information regarding any type of school policies surrounding the safety of my child while she goes back to school amid this pandemic. The only information I have is that if we choose full distance learning, she will lose the teacher that she has met twice and become comfortable with during her Google Meets. We don't know who our child's teacher will be if we do full distance learning. We don't know what her days will look like on the 3 days she's home if we do the hybrid plan, or what recess or mask breaks look like. Will my daughter get to run around outside and enjoy her recess? Or will she be put into a blocked off circle for her own space? How will my child be comfortable in a room with windows open in the middle of October to get the airflow needed to keep the room safe? What if my child or someone in my home isn't feeling well? I can keep her home from school, but does she get to log online for class? Will my child's class be around any other grades in school? How will they be kept in stable pods during drop off and pickup? What time do I even drop her off or pick her up? The only thing I have received is a couple surveys asking if I'll send my child back to in-school learning. How can I make a fully informed decision without all of the facts? The only fact I have right now is that you voted to keep kids out of school because it was unsafe without the proper HVAC filters. As far as I know, are not installed or even received yet. This was done even though our governor gave Warwick the green light for the schools to open. And as devastating as that decision was for everyone, I believed that you were doing what was best for our kids and our teachers and our community. So we buckled in and got ready for distance learning until the schools were updated accordingly. But because you are now voting before these filters are installed, I'm led to believe that the vote tonight is to solely give in to the demand from the many people to just reopen the schools regardless if it is safe or not. This seems careless. I'd like to reference a school committee meeting that took place on August 11th, 2020. During that meeting, our superintendent, Dr. Philip Thornton, had a conversation with Mr. Kevin Oliver. One specific part of that conversation that is still reflecting the current state of our schools is as follows. Dr. Philip Thornton set the scene that there was a meeting between Kevin Oliver and other school maintenance directors and Dr. Bramage, brought in by the state with a PhD in microbiology. Dr. Thornton asks when the meeting started and if there was a discussion on something called air exchange. From there, it goes to Dr. Thornton. Did he, Dr. Bramage, discuss older buildings when you could open a door and a window and create negative airflow? Mr. Oliver, yes, it did. If you could open a window and get air flowing across the room, he was adamant things like that could happen. Dr. Thornton, but how will that be achieved in October, November, and December? Mr. Oliver, obviously we can't have windows open, cold air and things of that nature. It's going to be a struggle to figure out a way to ventilate the rooms the way he recommended. That is the most concerning part to me as a mother. It will be a struggle to ventilate the rooms. We were told by our superintendent that we need the filters. I would like to know why they will be sending the children back before that happens. I do know kindergarten will get the filters first, which is great for my child. But what about grades 1 through 5 that you're sending back next week? They will be in the same school as my kindergarten. Why not stagger the kids in, starting with K as the filters come in and get installed? That gives the schools time to send out the information that parents need, and it'll give teachers time to get prepared. Most importantly, the schools would be safe. You have gone back and forth so many times on the reopening of schools. First, it's a hybrid, then it's none, then it's vets for K, then it's not, then it's their own schools, then it's not, now it is again. I understand this is an unprecedented situation. I also understand that you, the school committee, are in a difficult position. No matter what you do, people will be angry. No one wants to keep their kids home from school. We all want them back in class. But when our option to send them was taken away due to lack of airflow in August, that is a decision that you should stand behind. If it wasn't safe back in August, what makes it safe now? If it's another few weeks before the filters come in, then unfortunately, that's what it is. I know it's hard. It's hard for kids. It's hard for the parents. It's hard for the teachers. I've cried hearing the stories sent in by parents about their children and the difficulties they face with distance learning. But it would be more devastating if one of those students or teachers or parents passed away from COVID due to a lack of preparedness out of our schools. I can't stress this enough. The vote you take tonight is taking place prior to the schools being ready and up to the standards that you all set and agreed upon back in August. The vote tonight is taking place prior to parents having received any of the information that we need to make an informed decision of whether to send our kids back. I'm asking for two things. Give us the information we need as parents to make informed decision about sending our kids back to school when they reopen. Give us the details of what their days will look like. Give us the details of how they will be kept safe from COVID. Please stand behind your decision of installing the filters before the students go back. Our children and teachers deserve a safe environment. Let's follow through on that. Thank you. I am writing to tell you about the reopening of the Wowwick Early Learning Center at Drumrock. 9 of our 14 classrooms have been moved to Drumrock. The movers did an amazing job packing up our classroom in their entirety. I cannot speak to everyone's experience, but that was ours. The teachers and teacher assistants were responsible for unpacking and setting up their classrooms with the new COVID guidance. Special care was taken to accommodate our unique population of students. Our students arrived last week to a well-prepared environment. I am happy to report that we had a successful first week of school. I witnessed many happy reunions and introductions. For many of our students, this is their very first school experience. I would like to thank the school committee, the parents, and the administration for trusting us with this task. We understand the enormity of the job, especially during COVID. We do have 5 classrooms that are still doing distance learning and hope that they are not left out of the discussion when the reopening of elementary schools is planned. Thank you for all of your time and dedication to the district. Signed, cautiously optimistic. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. This time, we'll move to new business. G. Number 1, discussion action, hybrid reopening of kindergarten through grade 5. Ms. Danbrook and Dr. Thornton.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I can certainly begin. Obviously, we've heard lots of public comment on both sides of this question. I think we'll all agree there is no perfect solution in a pandemic, but I think we'd also agree in-person learning will help our youngest learners. The Arden report, as we discussed last week, is a temporary solution, a bridge in this conversation, an October bridge, with filters coming in near end of October for elementary schools. Our parent surveys, as you recall from last week, 80% or thereabouts for kindergarten voted to come back. 83% grades 1 through 5 voted to come back. Our hybrid plan, to me, is a practical first step in getting students back. So as we discuss this tonight, I would strongly recommend you to consider this. Tonight, to answer your questions, we have the whole team here, Mr. Gothberg, certainly for airflow questions, Ms. Danberg for logistics and timeline, Dr. Connolly for PPE, and Ms. Amelot for distance learning. So I start with Ms. Danbrook to give you our best thinking right now on the proposed timeline. From there, we can go into what comes next.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the school committee, I'd like to first thank our teachers, our principals, our parents, our staffs, and our students for all their hard work. I know this isn't easy. There's no great scenario for teaching and learning during a pandemic, whether it's in-person, hybrid model, or distance learning. I came before you at our last meeting with a timeline to open schools, and the feedback I received from teachers and some parents was that it was too aggressive of a timeline. So I decided to slow the timeline down. So we still need more time to prepare. We are working, continuing our work with hiring more staff. Mr. Oliver is met with some new custodians that will be coming back. We had our building aides come in today, so we're working to staff that. We're also working on gathering substitutes. So I know there are some concerns. The principals are doing an excellent job making school plans. So just to clarify, every school has a plan for their school, like mask breaks, breakfast, lunch, all the details, because every school is a little bit different. Arrival times, departure times, where the students will be arrived, what would that look like? So we do have detailed plans. I know some principals have sent them out this week. So hopefully by the end of the week, they'll all be out, and I'll make sure of that. So there are safety guidelines in place for every school. I still believe that we need to start getting our students back in school, especially kindergarten and first grade. So if I could review my new timeline with you, I'm looking at starting October 14th for kindergarten, October 15th, the other half of kindergarten. So we have the hybrid model, so half and half. And on the 16th, kindergarten. And I feel with those 3 days of kindergarten, we can reevaluate our plans, see what's working with that one grade, see what more we need to put in place, what we need to tweak. So then on October 20th, I'm proposing that we add grade 1 to kindergarten in October 21st. So that would be first grade coming to school with kindergarten, so those two grades. And it'll give us the time to evaluate how we are doing with the two grades in the school. I then I'm proposing to, on the 26th of October, to then add grade 3. On the 27th of October, still add the other half of grade 3 with the hybrid model. On October 28th, we still are keeping with K1, 2, 3 with the 4 grades in to see how that's working with safety, with lunches, breakfasts, with mask breaks. So we're going to be analyzing that. And do we need extra staff? Do we have enough staff with those grades? On October 29th, I'm proposing that we add grade 4 and the 30th add grade 4. And then I want to remind you that on those times that I just listed, the last few times, we will have the air purifiers, or we are scheduled to have the air purifiers in. November 4th is when 5th grade comes back to school, and November 5th, the other half of 5th grade. So by November 5th, elementary schools will be fully open.
And Madam Chair, just to back up 1 second to Ms. Dearbrook's point, and Mr. Gottlieb, you can help us with this. If memory serves, our tentative schedule is October 23.
October 23rd, I sent an email out again today to verify ship date, but I have not received a response yet. They're on a 3-hour difference, so they could come in at any moment.
And any questions?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Cornell. You're muted, Mr. Cornell.
Thank you. Dr. Thornton earlier told me that that's October 23rd is the dates when the air purifiers arrive. So Mr. Gothberg, how long will it take for the air purifiers to be implemented in all the schools for all the grades?
For elementary?
Yes.
For elementary, once they arrive, I am thinking approximately a week and a half to get them in every classroom. Right now, the electricians are moving ahead. Our WISE members have started pre-drilling all the holes so that all we have to do is put the brackets up, but it will take some time to unpack them, unwrap the filters, replace the filters back in the units, hang them, get them plugged in, and make sure they're running.
And
Okay.
Mr. Gottlieb, 594 last count? 594?
Yeah, approximately, yeah, 594.
It
Okay,
needs to
yeah,
happen sooner than a week. I'm sorry, Mr. Cornell. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just like that's very good information to have. I was very curious about that. And also, this timeline, it's better than a previous timeline, I'll say that, especially with the kindergarten starting next week than this week, because I've gotten many emails of concerned teachers saying that they won't be prepared for tomorrow, for example. So I'm glad that kindergarten's planned to start next week. So, and I think, hopefully that these will be set dates, because I know like many kindergarten parents and teachers are frustrated because kindergarten has been moved around a lot. So yeah, we really need to get those students back. And another thing regarding the survey, yeah, I understand that why you sent the survey to like get more information, but I think it should have been more specific in regards to getting parents' concerns, and also should have been out there longer, because as some of the public comments, what people said that they felt like it just wasn't specific enough, and maybe we could have gathered to better data there. So maybe in the future we can do that. And also in the future for surveys, could you send us the information, like not just tell us orally, but actually have the statistics, because that would be very helpful to have. Thank you.
Yes, we can do that.
Madam Chair?
Actually, Ms. Cobden put her hand up, and then Mr. Adams. Ms. Cobden, you're muted.
To go on Mr. Cornell's question, Mr. Gothberg,
Yes?
how is this work going to be done if we have kids in the school?
Has to be done second shift.
Okay. I'm done.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
I got a bunch of questions, so bear with me. Um, first, I just want to be sure. Will we have enough PPE to make sure that the kids are safe during the school day?
I'll give that to Dr. Conley, Madam Chair.
Please.
So we currently we did receive PPE from the state, and we also did an initial order. So we currently have 95 KN95 masks, 400 surgical masks, 1,100 face shields, and 590 gowns. We have not distributed all of that. We have focused on making sure that the nurses at vets who are, in person and at CTC have the proper PPE, and the special education classrooms as well. This week, we are expecting an additional delivery of 250 KN95 masks. And then we have a massive order that will come before you in the October school committee meeting. We're using the federal COVID funds for this order. That will be 19 goggles, 3,500 gowns, 15,000 surgical masks, 6,100 KN95 masks, and 190,000 gowns. Now, gloves. That appears to be adequate, but we don't know how quickly we'll go through the PPE. We don't know how many students will be symptomatic. We don't know how many times a day a nurse may need to change her KN95 mask or need to change her gown. So, it's our best estimate. I'm comfortable that very shortly we will have, especially after the October school committee meeting approval and ordering process, we should be well set for PPE. I do feel confident that we have enough now to protect the nurses. I think everyone needs to understand that not every teacher is getting PPE. It's not recommended. It's not necessary. Masks and hand washing and proper ventilation are the most important things for teachers. We're really emphasizing the use of PPEs for our nurses and for our teachers at vets. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Dr. Conley, could you explain briefly the KN95 mask in a little more detail on what that is and how it's different from what you hear on TV with the other masks?
Sure. The N95 masks are not provided by the state. Those are the masks that are used at the hospital. Those require specific training to be used properly. The KN95 masks are similar, but they need to be supplemented with the use of a surgical mask over the KN95 mask. It's recommended for people who are potentially exposed to COVID. So for us, that's really our school nurse teachers. They can be taken off and put back on a total of 5 times. And that's why I say to you, we really don't know how quickly we're going to go through the equipment that we have. If we only have one symptomatic student a week, we won't be using a lot of it. If we have, frequent possible exposure, it can only be taken off and put on a total of 5 times before it needs to be replaced by a new mask. Similarly with gowns, the gowns are semi-disposable. They're not like paper gowns, but they only need to be changed if, some type of bodily secretion gets on the gown. It's not like a doctor's office where we're going to be changing gowns every time in between students.
Just to kind of go off of that, do we have a plan for when we're running low? Are we able to get replacement PPE?
That's going to depend on funding. The PPE that we've ordered to date, we've used the federal funds for that. We haven't used any of our local general funds. Obviously, we didn't budget for this in the spring because we didn't know this was going to be happening. So frankly, unless we get more federal funds, that's what we've been using. I don't know what would happen at the general funds. We would have to figure out the funding source for this. We also are told by the state that they'll replenish our PPE, but that process is not as efficient or as easy as I think has been advertised across the state, which we try very hard to get clear information on how that will work, but that's also a work in progress. So, Mr. Adams, I don't have a clear answer to you at
Okay.
this point, but you know, it's not impossible. I just don't know what avenue it would happen with. And I'm certain if we needed PPE and I came before you and stated, you know, we need to find the funds to order it, we would figure it out.
Okay. No, I just want to make sure. I'm going to also bounce off of Mr. Cornell, the question he asked in terms of the statistics. Dr. Thornton, you know, I texted you earlier. Do you happen to have
Yep. Mr. Taylor has the info for you, I believe, on the survey.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor?
Yep. So on the kindergarten survey first, we had 512 responses. And it was broken up very consistently amongst all of the schools, with approximately anywhere from 8% to 11% of the responses being from each of the schools. And on the question, my child will be in attendance for in-person instruction at their home elementary school, with the note that please know that there is no bus transportation at this time. We had 78.3% respond with yes, with 21.7% respond with no. Again, that's the kindergarten survey. For the elementary survey, we've had 1,949 responses.
I'm sorry, what was that number?
1,949.
Okay.
Again, separated amongst the schools quite consistently, and also separated amongst the 5 grades that we surveyed quite consistently. And of the to the question, my child will be in attendance for in-person instruction at their home elementary school, with the note that says, please know that there may not be bus transportation at this time. We had 77.2% respond with yes, and 22.8% respond with no. And that's the elementary grades 1 through 5 survey.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know like the specific numbers because I understand 80% is a vast majority of the surveys, but also 80 we don't know how many responded, and I thought it was important for us to actually have those numbers. My next question is in terms of kids that are sick that are doing the hybrid model that didn't opt to do distance learning. Like what's our procedure there, and also what happens if they start getting symptoms of being sick during the day? Like, is it end all be all? Send them home? Do we just evaluate? Do we test? What's our procedure?
Madam Chair.
Please.
The Rhode Island Department of Education has created a playbook for school districts to follow, and we are following it to the letter. It depends on the symptoms that are being presented. It depends on the combination that could be potentially there, but we are following the playbook that the Rhode Island Department of Education provided us.
Okay.
Ultimately, most students do get sent home. So far, I mean, we've been at vets now. Last week was our first week, and CTC a little bit longer. But, you know, for the most part, students are sent home. And then how they get tested and what happens with that, it depends on the symptoms. And the playbook literally has a flow chart that we follow.
Okay. My next question comes with like live streaming classes for the teachers that are doing hybrid and distance learning. And I have a second question on that after. Do we have the capability to do that? 1, but 2, do we need parental consent for their children that are potentially going to be on camera?
Madam Chair, I'll go to Ms. Amelot for that question.
Lieutenant, Ms. Amelot?
So I wanted to share some of the thinking that we've had. And yes, this is thinking in the sense that, you know, we met this summer multiple times, and I want to thank again all of the educators who were involved in this. And then we also watched it begin to play out in schools. And so, Kyle is kind of, Mr. Adams brings it into the session, into your question of how fluid are students going to be, right, back and forth. And so thinking that it's a hybrid model, if you take a class and you think there's about 26 students at max in an elementary classroom, from the numbers that Dr. Taylor was giving, there might be 6 kids who are choosing to be permanently at home at this point in time. But we know as public schools that any given day, we have 24 hours to open our doors to a change in mind. So we could not mandate parents to make a decision and stick with that decision. So if you're thinking that we'd split those students into 2 groups, an A group and a B group, including the kids that were at home. So you'd have an A group that was planning to come to school, but also an A group that was planning to stay at home. You'd probably have about 10 kids in front of you and about 3 kids at home. Although now we've seen it happen in different schools, some students would need to be quarantining so that it could go up to maybe 4 or 5 kids at home and 8 kids in front of you. So I think we need to think about this as not as a full class that's in front of you and a full class that you're trying to monitor. And so I shared with you some of our thinking after Friday's school committee in an email just recently. And so we shared this with interventionists today. I want to thank my team, Dr. Conley, Ms. Danbrook, and my team that worked on this to kind of really think through taking our conversations from the summer and what would that look like. And so teachers really would be coming up with 2 days that then they would cycle through. So an A day where they would be meeting and welcoming all kids in the morning, whether they would be at home or in class, and so have a morning meeting. And then, and that's where attendance most likely would be taken, and kind of a check-in for the day. And then half of the students would be working on what we call anytime learning. So these are designed, we know actually Google Meet time is an equity issue, so we would not encourage a student to be streaming all day long. And so these are activities where students could be collaborating on a Google Doc. I mean, we're thinking anywhere at the age of 5 to 11. That's a large age span of their developmental, what activities that they would be engaging in. But they could be reading books at home. They could be reading tasks. They could be responding to literature. They could be watching screencastifies. They could multiple opportunities that they could be engaging in some learning that they really need time and space. So if you're thinking about an old class, a brick and mortar classroom, it was just last year, thinking about station rotation, you would think that these are some of the things that the students are doing in their stations, right? When they are not with direct instruction with their teacher. So then you think about what's happening on that A day. Well, while students would only be getting 2 days of school, there's a lot, the class sizes are significantly smaller on those days. And so we're really encouraging a lot of student voice and the opportunity to hear and see students learning. So in that, what I mean by that is, as teachers, we know we can really see learning from facial expressions, from students' questions, really giving the students a voice during those 2 days, those 2 days that they're in school. And yes, if a student was part of that A group and needed to be home because they had a fever, or their sibling was exposed, but they could still be learning, the teacher would be joining them via selected Google Meets. And so what I mean by selected Google Meets is that it would not be a 6-hour streaming. That would not be appropriate for a 5-year-old, 11-year-old, or a 45-year-old, right? So that's just not how we would be designing that day. And so that would be, if they were part of a guided reading group, they would be joining. If they were part of a math lesson, they would be joining in that component. And so we're working with our tech integrationists and thinking about what would be the easiest way to send that Google Meet out for teachers. And so it's thinking about one continuous Google Meet that the teacher tells the students when to join on, so that they wouldn't be constantly working on sending out different links and how that, so the link would open up and shut down. So the teacher would be opening that throughout the day at a time that the teacher wanted. And so, yes, they would be designing on that Monday some anytime learning experiences, but those would be replicated for the other group of students on that B day. So the students, it would kind of work in a cycle that this A and B day should be seen as a grouping of 2 days that the students would continuously go through. And we worked with, in the guidance I sent you, we kind of really worked to see what was the instructional guidance for each role in our school community, and then what would be the schedule guidance. thinking that we really did not want students to be pulled from that classroom experience. So when at all possible, math, reading interventionists, L support, resource teachers would be working with those students that they see on their at-home days, checking in on their anytime learning, working on their IEP goals, working on really bringing them up to the core. So that's the thinking that we have now, because everything is so fluid. We recognize that, yes, in concept, having a separate virtual academy that was distance learning would be, there's online schools. Most of those online schools require a parent to be home all day long. We don't have that capability to make that requirement, right? So also, those online schools, those are a group of students that stay together for a significant amount of time usually. In public school, job situations change, so a family could choose distance learning on one day and need to actually have face-to-face learning on another because it's not working out. We really need to think that this whole entire school year, let's hope that as we move towards the spring, that we have different opportunities to bring more and more kids into school in a very safe way with vaccines. We wouldn't really want a child to be changing classroom educators 3 to 4 times this school year. So keeping them with their classroom teacher and having them join via Google Meet, not live streaming, but the classroom teacher with their cam or on their Google Chromebook would be able to kind of really have those small conversations. If you're thinking that they're having a guided reading table, maybe 4 kids would be in front of them, 1 student would be on that Chromebook camera joining. So that's really what why we've talked to many educators in other systems, thinking about how this is playing out, and realizing that things are changing every day.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Dr. Conlon.
If I could add to that, we realized at VETS too that having teachers have to teach in-person students and students at home is unavoidable when classrooms end up getting quarantined or students get quarantined. So even if we may start with a full in-person scenario, if there's an exposure and the student now has to stay at home, to Ms. Amelot's point, we don't want to then have to switch them to a new teacher. We want them to stay with their consistent teacher. So it's really almost, I think, impossible to do full distance learning and full in-person instruction. As much as I agree with that concept, the reality is it's very hard to implement. And we also find that we end up with very imbalanced classrooms, too many kids on a caseload in distance learning, or too many kids with the in-person instruction. It's not equal or evened out, and we can't control it like we do typically at the elementary level, where we can, set the classrooms accordingly. So we've learned some things along the way with VETS, and that was one conclusion we realized pretty quickly. We cannot create a pure in-person and a pure distant learning scenario.
So the kids who choose distant learning, they
would stay with their classroom teacher that they have right now. And
will they have a separate classroom teacher, or will they be in a hybrid, but at home?
They would be in the hybrid, but at home. So with their same classroom teacher at this point in time, I'm thinking that we have recognized that it is unavoidable for a teacher to not be asked to teach a group of students that if we were taking every student who might need to quarantine and taking them out of that teacher's classroom, that would be a constant flux in communication that would be almost impossible to manage. So really keeping that consistency of having that classroom teacher and recognizing that we're only talking about 20%, as Dr. Taylor said, across. So we have classrooms of 16 students sometimes at the elementary level. So, we're not talking about many students who are staying home, but we also recognize that some of those students who are coming in face-to-face may at any given time need to be asked to stay home to quarantine. And we don't want to set up a situation that those students would be constantly switching an educator and a classroom of peers.
So I appreciate the guidelines and everything that you said, but I don't think either question was answered. Is if we have the capability to live stream, and I understand that there are Chromebooks that have webcams, but that's also a Chromebook, and like and let's be fair, the quality is not fantastic. But also, do we need parental consent for if a student is going to be on the live stream?
So and Dr. Taylor, I'll let you add in as well, but the idea, Mr. Adams, is not that teachers would need to be recorded all day long, right? That they would actually be meeting with these students in smaller groups, that any kind of recorded lesson would be a screencastify that might be sent home earlier to do on their anytime learning. So we really want to minimize that, like what you might call a lecture or a teacher just speaking in the classroom. When the students are in class, we are recognizing that collaboration time is so essential for students to be talking and working with each other. So we're working with educators to think about how would they design that day. So it's not as if a teacher would be needing to be recorded all day long. They would be asking a student to join a Google Meet, and we have the capability of doing that. And the students would, and I'll defer to Dr. Taylor about all the technology in that regard, but that we are having students on Google Meets right now, and parents are that is how students are participating at this point in time.
Yeah, and I can jump in too, Mr. Adams, if you'd like. So we have, as a district, 1 gig of bandwidth coming into the building. That obviously gets split up amongst the different buildings, but in theory, if everything was pushing appropriately, a traditional Zoom meeting at 720 HD would be about 1.2 megabits per second. So in theory, you could run 833 concurrent Zoom meetings. But that being said, and I would never guarantee that on any given day, everything works perfectly, because as we all know, there's issues at the pole. There's sometimes, even on a day inside of our building, a switch needs to be rebooted. There's always technological issues that pop up, COVID or no COVID, or distance learning, no distance learning. I did speak to the internet service provider, Ocean. This had come up in a previous meeting. I think Mr. Testa asked the question, a similar question. And this was, in talking to Ocean, if we needed more bandwidth, they were going to open that up for us and allow us to see if that would rectify any issues that would pop up. So if that was the case, we do have that. I have that connection ready with them to allow us more bandwidth if needed.
To the point, Mr. Adams, I remember the number. We could burst, as the term is, to 1.5 gigs if need be.
Okay. Now, this is, I'm assuming it's gigabits, but is it per building? I just want to make sure. What? It's 1 gig.
1 gig into the district, and then filter down from there.
Okay.
So that's a good point. As each building, I believe our elementary schools have a little bit less bandwidth, as you might imagine, than our high schools would, with middle schools being probably right in the middle of that. But then that would get cut down through the different buildings. And as with anything else, that requires, once the internet's coming into the building, our switches need to be firing, and our access points in the individual classrooms need to be doing the same thing. So and then the wiring between all that. So there's always some points where we notice on a daily basis that things might pop up. We do have a relationship with Wally, who does our managed services, as we've presented here in the past. And they're always at the ready to assist us with any issues that we may have as support.
Okay. My next question is, it's a callback, I guess, to when we first were going to put kindergarten in at vets, and I had asked this question then. I'm asking again now. For those teachers that feel unsafe, or if they have health risks, are we making some form of accommodation for them to be able to teach distantly, over a distance?
To that, I go to Ms. Ruggieri in HR.
Evening. We have standards that we use for medical accommodations. There are certain procedures that we go through. So we get a physician's note that comes in, and then the school department physician then consults with the teacher's physician and determines whether it's a reasonable accommodation. And that's how we make those determinations.
Okay. And I'm assuming if those accommodation is met, then they teach in a distance environment.
If there's an opportunity to do so.
Okay. I have.
Wait, Mr. Adams.
Yes.
And if there's not an opportunity to do so, I'm getting a little concerned from a few things I've heard.
So if there's not an opportunity, so for instance, if we have, say, 6 second grade teachers who are requesting the accommodation and we don't have 6 opportunities for them, then they would be able to utilize their sick time.
All right. So I have 2 more questions. In terms of, and a parent had mentioned this, and this is what, and I'm curious now. In terms of kids that end up socializing and getting too close, and a teacher has to keep them apart, how do they keep them apart? Because like we don't want this, we don't want to endanger the teacher either by having them have to separate the kids by getting up close.
So, Mr. Adams, so the principals have separated, as you know, we have half a class coming in. So you might have, let's say, 10 students in the class, but then you might have 2 distance learning, it might be 8. So they have now tables or desks separated, mostly 5 to 6 feet apart. And the students are to remain at their desks, so they won't be moving around the room. All their materials will be under their chair in some type of basket, which is theirs. So they have their own materials and won't be sharing. The teacher will keep a safe distance from the students, and the students will be distanced from each other. In the playground, we're going to have different areas for each pod, but they also will be staying distance 4 to 6 feet apart outside. So within the principal's plan, there are distance safety throughout the plan, whether it's eating lunch, whether it's a safety drill, a fire drill, put your arms out to keep distance. Whether it's a lockdown drill, we're going to put X's in the room so each child is assigned a different space. So, so we are very cognizant of the importance of distancing.
All right, and then the last one that's been brought up, and I want to know your answer. In terms of windows open or mask breaks outside, what's our plan for come November and December and January? Like, what's our plan?
I can start with that. So as we discussed, the elementary plan with the purifiers, that's the bridge where we get the purifiers in the first wave on or around October 23rd. We're putting them in.
Hopefully.
Obviously, as the month of October is ending, we're turning on the heat as well. So you'll see a combination of the heat being fired up and the windows still cracking the protocol. But after that week and a half time, or sooner, Mr. Gothberg, as Ms. Backus said, we would have the purifiers in elementary, and you would not have the open window.
Okay. That really does it for me. I also wanted to give Mr. Testa a run for his money in terms of my amount of questions today. So,
Ms. Cobden? Well done, Mr. Adams. Go ahead, Ms. Cobden.
Okay, it's my turn now. Mr. Tester, you're gonna have to wait. I have a ton of questions. First of all, I'm gonna start with, why all of a sudden are we not believing Dr. Broomridge and all the other experts about the window being open?
I can start with that. I think with anything with this work, thinking changes over time. If you think back to August 11th or thereabouts, that's when Dr. Broomridge started. His first conversation was a box fan by the door, a box fan in the window, cross ventilation. That caused us to call the state fire marshal. That was the nexus of the problem, right? Fast forward to 2 Wednesdays ago, the governor talked about 6 inches of a window, no box fan for air changes. That prompted us to have Arden come in, and that's where we got that latest thinking. So, as the pandemic evolves, the thinking changes. We're not proposing box fans. We're not proposing opening exterior doors, as Arden has said also, as you know. But the experts are saying we can get the air change with the window open and the interior door open. So that's where that evolved.
Okay, well, I have some questions on this. I don't know if you know, but I met Ms. D'Ambrook and Mr. Gothberg on Friday at Oakland Beach. And what I was showed was we're looking for opening a window, opening the door, and the one across the hall, creating that exchange. Is that true?
That's true. Across the hall is, they're not all doors are directly across the hall, but the theory, the way it works is if air pushes in, it has to go somewhere. So if the classroom is open and the door across the hall and the window in the classroom across the hall, the air will move through and you will get your air exchange. If the air comes in, it has to go somewhere.
Well, I know that Arden only went to 2 of our schools, and that concerned me. So I decided to go to several of our schools, and I randomly picked them. I went to Hoxie today. Things I saw was there was no protection for COVID with the nurse. I guess they're waiting for that. The secretary, who sits out front, she has no protection around her like the woman at Oakland Beach has. But my biggest concern is the only 2 rooms that cross ventilate in that school, because of the way it's designed, are the music instrumental room and the art room, which aren't even going to be used anyway. So there's really no cross breezes in Hoxie, which concerned me. Now, the other thing that concerns me is they have actually nice windows. They're similar to what is at Oakland Beach, where they're wide, pretty good size, and they open from up to down. They don't pop in or out. That school is surrounded by woods, and it's pretty embedded in woods. And we even had an issue with a car chase at that school going through the woods and the grounds. I guess it was a year ago. I think it was a year ago. These windows are very low to the ground, and you open them up. Honestly, I'm 5'5". I could get into the school in a second. And I'm really concerned about security with these windows that are like that. And it's like that through the whole school. The nurse's office, all the way down every hallway. I then went to Holloman, which is, I believe, designed very similar to Sherman, from what I was told. And the windows there are literally 18 inches wide. I brought a measuring tape with me. And in each room, only a couple are open. Now, we have big windows in a little area of the hallway that would have to be open to get any type of cross breeze, because they're in the same situation where there's no rooms right across. So you'd have to open those windows. And again, I find that a security issue. So then I went over to Cedar Hill School, and I was actually given this very nice map, and I was able to write on it. All those doors of each classroom, none of them are close to each other. In fact, they're about 16.5 feet diagonally, or 17 feet across from each other. So I don't know how that's going to work. It would have to be very windy. There were 2 classrooms that were very good, and that was classroom 6 and 9, and they could do it. Now, over in the kindergarten area where the very young children are, there's that big open area. So the cross breeze, it's going to really have to be strong because that's a pretty good walk from the walls on one side of 1, 2, 3, and 4 to the big open area to 11, 12, 13, and 14. The only grades that I saw that would probably work as far as this vent.
We might have lost her.
She's frozen. Yeah, there she is. You're muted, Ms. Cobden.
Yeah,
There you
I
go.
lost my connection. So now I'm reading this Arden report, and it basically says if it's no wind, then it's not going to work. So I'm really confused about this. Okay. And I just wanted an explanation why we're doing this. What if we get all these kids in the classroom and we don't get the filters on time? What happens then?
Yeah, I guess my response would be,
And it gets really cold out or whatever. I mean, we are in New England.
as you know, this is a pandemic where everyone's doing their best. There are a lot of what ifs. Our best thinking is with the experts from Arden, we get airflow. In most cases, is it perfect? Absolutely not. Will the filters come in on time? We certainly hope so. There are a lot of what ifs, but to us, with the new timeline, we think it's staggered enough, it makes sense enough to give the kids the benefit we want to have.
I'm just a little aggravated because now if we're going to go with what Arden is saying, then this should have just been started in the beginning at this point. I'm concerned about these schools that don't have cross breezes. I only went to 3 of them.
Yeah, I would disagree. Arden didn't come out with information until recently. Had we had that back on August 11th? Absolutely. August 11th was box fans, hallways and windows, different conversation from a few weeks ago.
I hate to say it, but one of the gentlemen, I think it was a gentleman in public comment, wrote a letter, and he was absolutely correct because I do remember that conversation. But put that aside, okay? I do have questions. I'm glad to see that you moved the time for kindergarten, but and we're going to do this hybrid, even though that's going to make people upset, which I would not do anything but hybrid. I would not vote for anything but hybrid right now. I'm just concerned that it's going too fast. Maybe we should have a week another week in between each grade. I mean, I just feel like we're slamming kids in, and I think slow and safe would be a better approach. I don't feel like this is going slow. And I mean, parents need to know that these kids are not going to be 6 feet apart. They're going to be 3 feet apart if we're lucky, right? I've been in the schools. I've seen the desks.
The model is 6 feet with a hybrid model.
Okay. And I really think we need more time to figure out the distance learning thing, because I think from what I've seen in other schools, it's not going very well, not even in Cranston. I've talked to people in Cranston, and apparently it's not working well. I'm concerned about that. I think people need to understand what is recess is going to look like. What is lunch going to be like? I think that parents need to know this. I need to know this, but I really do think the parents need to get a full understanding. And one of the things I want a full understanding is, and I had a couple of parents that have said they don't care about security. I do care about security. And I am concerned about having these large windows open that are very low to the ground. And I pointed 2 of them out at Oakland Beach to Miss DeAmbrook, and we discussed that today. But when I went over to Hoxie, every single classroom is like that. Every single classroom, including the nurse's office. So, I mean, I think parents need to understand that there's things that we're giving up to have these kids in school. And it's not just COVID. We're throwing away all our Rhode Island State Police regulations that we've instilled in our schools for years and have trained our kids and our teachers and our staff to follow. And that makes me nervous. I mean, we don't live in a perfect world. And I had to explain this to people because I don't think a lot of people understand this. We have contentious divorces with huge cases about custody. We have kids that are ripped out of homes in foster care. And then we just have the plain lunatics that do things like at Sandy Hook. And I'm worried about that. And, you know, I had the governor's office call me today. They called me 2 hours before this meeting, which upset me because I've been sitting here for months, and they never contacted me. They didn't bother to try to work with us, not with the school committee, because this is the first time I heard from them. And to call me 2 hours before a meeting upset me because we're not going to accomplish anything 2 hours before a meeting starts that they want me to vote on this. I don't know. I just feel like this is being rushed and it's coming from the State House. And, you know, I want the kids in school more than anything. But I don't know. I feel like I vote on this. I look like a hypocrite because I was really looking at Dr. Bromage and all the other specialists that were explained to me. And now Arden comes in, which I know nothing about Arden. And they look at 2 of our schools when we have, what, 9? And you know, I go to a few schools and there's no cross ventilation going on. I don't need to be an expert to see that. And now with the windows open, that really upsets me that there's so much access. And let's talk about a kid going out the window. I mean, these things are really low to the ground. So, I mean, I have parents saying, oh, well, the Warwick Police Department will handle that. They don't have 9 patrol officers to hang out at our school. Maybe the governor would like to give some of us their people from the National Guard that's supposed to be available for us. I don't know. But I think parents need to know that security with this plan right now is gone. There's no security in our schools. We can keep the main doors shut, but everything literally is out the window.
Actually, do you have anything else, Ms. Cobb?
I do want to point out that in the schools that I went into, the related service providers, they don't have windows in their rooms. And that just makes me nervous. I hope they're going to be getting I hope they're on the first list also, you know, with elementary, to have the filters installed because they don't have windows in their room. And I hope the nurses are going to get done first too, because obviously they are in the line of this. And I don't know how everyone feels, but should we be doing it also in the rooms that we're going to have sick kids waiting in?
Madam Chair,
Superintendent.
couple thoughts first on the last point first, if I could. Yes, Ms. Cobden, Mr. Gosberg did go around with all the schools with a map, and the providers, the nurses' offices, those locations are targeted for the purifiers.
In the isolation rooms.
In the isolation room, those are part of the conversation. In terms of the windows, a couple thoughts. First, I would say inherently in schools, there are windows. It has been for 100 years. In terms of Open Beach, there are 2 unique classrooms. I'll grant you that Miss Danbrook does have a solution she wanted to talk to you about for those 2 rooms. Miss Danbrook?
So, Ms. Cobden, Mr. Heatherton came up with a solution of using a wooden dowel to put in the window, so to protect it from being open more. And also, you know, during the spring and in the fall, those windows are usually open anyways because the teachers want to get some fresh air in there because it gets a little stifling hot and sometimes. So those windows are open. I understand your concerns, but just to let you know that those windows are open certain times of the year just to bring some cooler air into a warm room for the students. But Mr. Heatherton did have a solution he thought would be viable to protect the students and make those windows safe.
No, I don't feel a dollar makes a window safe, but, you know, I just want parents to know there is a huge security breach in our schools then.
Ms. Danbrook, you've worked for Warwick Public Schools for better than 30 years, I think.
This is my 36th year.
Thought so. So,
I wasn't finished.
I'm sorry, I'm addressing the window issue.
But shouldn't I finish and then you tack on like we did with everybody else?
Sure, Ms. Cobden, go ahead.
You know, I've had people say that we're holding off because there are liability issues, and that's not the case. And my other question is it wrong to ask the state, since they have these K through 12 special COVID things before kids go back? Should we have them all tested, including the teachers? I'm done now. Thank you.
Somebody want to answer those questions?
Madam Chair.
Dr. Conley?
That I can address the last question about getting everyone tested, because that's been posed to me as well. We have no ability to enforce that or require that of our students or our staff. It's not currently recommended by the Department of Health. The process that has been put in place by the Department of Health is that all staff and students are to pre-screen. So if they have any of the symptoms, they should not be reporting to school. And then there are testing sites that have been put in place across the state specific for school students and staff, where they can call the Department of Health and arrange for same-day testing. So the process that's been created is testing for students who have symptoms, students and staff members who may have symptoms or who may have been exposed.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Cobden? Ms. Cobden? Oh, she's frozen. Thank you, Dr. Conley. Ms. Danbrook, just, Ms. Cobden, are you back? You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
Yes, I got kicked off. I apologize.
You could hear Dr. Conley?
I heard the gist of it. We don't have the right to ask kids to or teachers to be tested before they come in. I thought that would be similar to an inoculation in a sense, just to be on the safe side. I just thought I'd put that out.
Well, we can't
If it
demand
was
those.
possible, I think it would be helpful, especially, you know, with the timeline that we're looking at, with a week, and a week, without the filters and without weather knowledge of what's going to be blowing or not blowing and what the temperature outside is going to be or not be. So, I mean, it could get hot. We've had Indian summer where it's been 80 degrees and stale air. I mean, I'm just concerned because, I mean, just last week before we had that good rain, 3 nights in a row, I was uncomfortable because it was so humid. There was no breeze coming in until the storm came. So I'm just concerned. I mean, I am concerned just like everybody I hope else would be when we've been focused on the air quality all this time. And now this random company, I mean, Dr. Bromage has the knowledge. He's an you know, this person's an expert. He's an expert. And I don't know who these ardent people are. And I don't really think if they're going to make an assumption on our schools that they should have gone to all of them and looked at them. Because I'm not an expert, but I can walk in and see that these schools, there's no cross ventilation. Thank you.
Thank you. The state sent Arden and Dr. Bromage came in for an invitation of Wright, I believe, and is certainly a scientist, which makes a huge difference. Now, I have a question. I just want to set up a scenario. Ms. Danbrook, you've been here 36 years. Have you ever had a situation where an intruder tried to crawl in through the window or where a child tried to crawl out of a window?
I have not had personally experienced that, and I have not heard of that happening across the district ever.
I know that most schools have windows that they open. Certainly, it could be a cause for concern, but I don't think it's a cause for major concern. Ms. Cobden?
Well, I just, and I hate to say this and use that example because it's sad and it was devastating, but in a nice Connecticut, New England town, look what happened at Sandy Hook. You don't think it's going to happen, but it can happen. And honestly, we're basically putting out there that our windows are going to be open. So, I mean, then
Windows
that's like saying like, oh, well, if it wasn't COVID and everything was the same way, that's almost like saying, oh, well, hell, let's not lock the doors. We spent all that money to make sure the doors are closed and locked when the kids and the teachers are in there in class. Well, let's just forget that. And let's not do our drills anymore because you know what? Nothing's happened. I mean, we can't live like that. But I just want parents in the community to be aware that there's huge security problems with this.
Madam Chair?
1 minute, Superintendent. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and we're trying to figure out how to get these kids back, and it certainly isn't perfect. And I won't use Mr. Tester's quote. Superintendent.
Just really quick, if you look at the after action reports of Sandy Hook and things like that, I've been to several courses on that. It's not through an open window. Typically, it's another way. But the main defense you have is a fast response time in drilling, and we do both. And we have a fast response time with our work police. So that's really the best defense as far as talking to teachers about this work and talking about safety, and also working with the police. As you probably know, last year all of our faculty had a faculty meeting with a police officer on drilling for a shelter in place in these types of situations. So there is no impregnable school building, but Warwick is trained well and we have a fast response time.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Adams.
I just want to respond to that. Just in terms of a fast respond time being the best defense, I understand that it is our respond time being fast is very good. It's great. But just on the other side, I think the best defense is a proactive defense, not a reactive defense.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Mr. Tester.
Thank you. Well, I'll start it off by saying, let's not make the perfect be the enemy of the good here. And that's exactly what we're doing here. And that's exactly what, in my opinion, much of the public comment was. Dr. Taylor, how many total respondents did we have between K and grades 1 through 5? About 2,400 altogether?
2461.
All right, 2,400, right? And if I'm not mistaken, those responses were tied to the student's ID number?
We did that. Yes, they were, and but the ID number in the elementary survey was not a required question.
Okay. So
in the garden, it was a required question. Yes.
All right. So even if each response was a student, right? That's better than half of our elementary students. So, and I understand that some parents didn't respond because they didn't feel they had enough information. There was nothing on the survey for them to fill out comments. I understand all that, but you still had 2,461 respondents. So when your total elementary population, I think, is around 4,400 kids, thereabouts, I think that's a very good sample. And if those responses came in at 50-50, I think it's a different discussion, but they didn't. I have to take some issue with the characterization that somehow, with us trying to put elementaries in now the week of the 14th or whatever, that we're somehow being reckless. I completely reject that characterization because it's wrong. I think if this committee has acted very deliberately and very responsibly, I think. And I would add a couple of things. I'd add number one, we were the first district to mandate mask wearing because the original state guidance came out and said, well, mask wearing is recommended. And we mandated it for students too. So we took that seriously. I would contend that the whole issue of air exchange and air ventilation wouldn't have even come up at the state level to the extent that it did if it weren't for us. So we are being responsible here. And I need to correct the historical record because this stuff morphs. This is like when the kids are in a circle and you start them in a circle and the cow is brown, and by the time it comes around, it's a horse and it's gray. When this started,
Telephone.
okay? Yeah, thank you. So, I'd start the whole thing by saying, I had a coworker once who gave an explanation of a situation, and he titled it "Things Change," and it's appropriate here. Okay, back in the summer, we were going hybrid. City of Warwick decided they were going a hybrid model, and we were going down that path up until Dr. Bromwich came in and said, "Hey, you've got to do air exchanges." And it was at that point that things changed, and we realized, we can't get air exchanges, right, as currently constituted. So that was the first thing that changed. So then we decided to go distance learning. Okay, and although I voted against it, I supported it. I just thought we acted 2 weeks too early. But this committee made the right decision there. Okay, then the discussion on air exchanges circled around open windows and box fans. So we saw a lot of emails come through that said, well, open windows were never a good idea before, but now suddenly they are. Not true. The open windows and box fans were not acceptable to us, right? Because we had electrical problems with the drawer of the fans, and we had fire code issues, okay? The issue wasn't open windows and box fans. The issue was air exchanges. And I've watched some of Dr. Bromage's, however you pronounce his name. He's spoken to a lot of superintendent organizations and all that. And his key is air exchanges. You can get them with open windows. You can get them with open windows and fans. You can get them with central HVAC units. So Arden Engineering was hired by the state to do those kinds of analyses. Arden is a professional company. They're not going to stake their reputation on something that's snake oil. It's just not going to happen. So we shouldn't attack that messenger. I don't think that's right. And I mean, you can go in a room with open windows and the air may feel still to you, but there are meters that measure airflow in rooms. And Ms. Cobbin, if you want, we can put forward something, have Arden come down and test every single classroom. We'll appropriate the money and we'll go forward doing that. I think their professional estimation is pretty good. Again, it was about air exchanges and custodial staffing, and we couldn't fill those positions. So we solved the custodial staffing issue by using outside sources to supplement what we had. So those were really the two biggest things. And when we announced our plan to go hybrid, we had said there'd be staggered start times and recess and all that. And that was probably a 10,000 foot level. So we put it out there originally. We just didn't have the granular detail yet. But you wouldn't get that until you were actually going to implement the plan. So I don't have a problem with pushing the timetable to the 14th. I would not want to see it pushed any further out. Okay. I noted tonight, because I was kind of keeping a quick running score of all the public comments in favor of reopening. The largest majority, I think almost 2/3, were from parents, and that's understandable. So, to say that we're not supporting our own decision, I think it's just not fair, because it's not true. Let me see. I have my notes here. Bear with me. Again, no plan, regardless of whatever we develop, is going to guarantee a particular result. So we can go with open windows and open doors until the HEPA filters come in. And then when the HEPA filters come in, come November, December, okay, that's no guarantee that we're not going to have a positive case. Not at all. Not at all. And as a side note, to use the vets instance as somehow as indicative of something, I think 4 days in and we have a positive test, I think it's pretty safe to say that whoever it was came into the building with it. I don't think it happened at school. That's my personal opinion, but I'm not a doctor. Let's not forget that we have masking in place, we have the distancing, and from what I understand, in most of these classrooms, there's going to be 10 or 11 kids, tops. And there is a teacher in the room, and in most instances, a TA in the room. So the open windows and kids jumping out of windows doesn't concern me at all. It doesn't. And I had said this at an earlier meeting. We have two issues here. You have school safety, where the state police wants all classroom doors closed, and then you have COVID. which is a different set of circumstances, which in most instances mean you need to leave your classroom doors open. So one of them has to prevail here, and that's a judgment call. Me, I'd have the COVID one prevail and keep the classroom doors open. You go in other districts, and I know this because I heard from teachers in other districts who pointed out something which was a pretty good point to me. This is an educator in elementary school in another district. Their classroom doors are open, their exterior doors are closed. When the kids go to the bathroom, they're escorted. So the kids are probably a little bit more secure than in a normal day. So, and the open windows doesn't bother me because when my kids were in school in the spring and summer months and fall months, the teachers would open the windows. It was fine. So it should be no different now. I'm not, Sandy Hook was awful. Of course it was. But I think that we can't see using that as an obstacle to this plan. And if the HEPA filters arrive on time and they're installed by November, December, by end of October, I think we're in pretty good shape. I just, not putting these kids back into school, I think it doesn't serve them. It doesn't serve them. I have a niece who's going to be a senior. When my sister-in-law said, "Do you think it's okay to put her in school?" I said, yes. And I said, I'm kind of sad that my daughter graduated last year. I wish I still had kids in school, because I would be telling you tonight that I would be putting them back in school because I'm confident in the steps that this committee has taken. I'm positive. I'm confident in the work that the administration, all the people have done. So I would not be uncomfortable putting my kids in school. Now, I fully realize some parents won't, and they want to keep their kids home. That's fine. But we have a distance learning plan in place. Ms. Amelot kind of explained what it was. And if I remember correctly, without looking back to previous meeting notes, that was pretty much how we said we were going to do it, knowing full well that it should adapt and change as we implement it. But we can't adapt and change anything until we start. So we just need to start. Ms. Danbrook, I'm sorry, my rant's over. I have one question for you. When I started writing down the times, when does grade 2 go in?
So grade 2 starts on October 22nd would be
Okay, I missed that.
A hybrid, and October 23rd would be the B hybrid start.
Okay, I missed that one. I just wrote all the other ones down. I have no problem pushing. You guys are the educational experts. We're not. You do it collaboratively. I hope with all the stakeholders, and I trust you. So I was all set to go on the 8th. Okay, but that was last week. Now some teachers raised some valid points about the preparation. That's fine. So starting on the 14th, I think is fine. And again, we're not forcing everybody to come back. If you're not comfortable, then you can still keep your child home. If you're not comfortable for the entire year, you can keep your child home the entire year. But I think the parents' voices need to ring loud and clear here, because they're closer to their kids than anyone else in this computer screen. And no one knows their kids like they do. I would support this new timetable. I don't think we're being hypocrites at all. I think this still aligns with how measured we've been as a body and how we made these decisions. For me, the thing is, Mr. Gothberg and Dr. Thornton, is to keep our foot on the throat of Rabbit Air Company and find out when we're going to get our filters, even those first 60 that seem to be in a limbo somewhere. So I think that what you proposed is good, not perfect, but it's good. And so I would encourage passage of it because the students need it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Testa. A few kids you could adopt if you're interested.
No room at the house.
Okay. I have concerns about distance learning and about teachers not being able to teach when they're available. We're looking for subs all the time, and I think we need to revisit that and make accommodations, because there are people who have fragile health issues but who can't teach, and we may need them. So I don't want to piss people off or anger people or put them in a bad situation if they're, doing a great job with distance learning and things like that. So I don't think we should get too high on what we want to do with that. I think we need to be a little bit flexible and look at what's going on and what the need is where. Because a second grade teacher can teach basically what, K through 5 anyway, right? Or K through 6. So there are different ways perhaps that we can use them. Anybody else?
Madam Chair, I have one question.
Okay, Mr. Adams, go ahead.
So we had a survey go out to the parents about children going back to schools. Did we have a survey go out to teachers about if they would go back?
I believe we did at some point, Dr. Thornton.
I think we did in the summer. I think we did put something out in the summer about going back to school, but we haven't done one recently to answer that question.
Because I think that would be really important to have, like, especially if we're looking for, if we want to go for subs, which I'm of the same opinion of Ms. Bacchus, where I don't want to say, well, hey, you're fearful for you or whoever's safety. Sorry, you don't have a job, so you could go on sick time, but.
Mr. Adams, I think Jerry might have done something in HR, so.
Yes, Madam Chair. We have sent out many notifications through HR of the procedure for those teachers who have medical reasons that they can't attend. We have followed our legal guidance the whole way on the procedures that we're to follow. And like I said, the communications have been sent out through our office.
Well, I'm saying this and I'm flustered because I don't know how to put the words. Is based on the kids that are not going back. It's not to say that every second grade teacher or every sixth grade or every history or whatever it may be is going to back out. So like we could absolutely utilize whatever skill set they have. And in any way to kind of not say we'll go on sick time or whatever the procedure may say. So that's my
Whether
my
they're
thing.
in school or on sick time, we're paying them. And so I just assume pay folks who can work to work if at all possible.
Madam Chair, if I may, Mr. Adams, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, how much are we going to democratize this? And I don't mean to sound flip at all, but this really has to be about the students first.
Okay, so they can die. That's fine. Is that what you want?
No, I don't want any students to die.
I'm not talking about the students. I'm talking about the teachers that are compromised.
If an employee is compromised and I have pre-existing conditions myself, by the way. An employee has pre-existing conditions, and there's a process by which they can go through HR to Ms. Ruggieri, I'm not going to use the right phrase, but to get to become medically excused, we have that process. But I think even the commissioner said, being afraid in and of itself isn't a valid reason. And that's a dangerous slope to go down. If I'm just fearful, I mean, there's a lot of people that could be fearful. I'm sure there are nurses and anyone in the healthcare profession that are fearful too, but they still go about it. And one last thing I want to add, it's not related to that, but just dawned on me. Anybody who thinks that we're making a decision to go back because we're getting pressure from the state is out of their mind. Okay, I think this body has shown that we don't bend to that kind of pressure, and this has nothing to do with state pressure. Sorry, that was my side.
Madam Chair.
No, it's not. Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, so I think Mr. Adams brings up a good point, because last time when we approved the kindergarten, we said that teachers who wanted to opt out due to health concerns could do so. And after we made the vote, I got emails from teachers that said they were required to get a doctor's note, and there were issues, and then until we rectified it. So I was wondering if the same circumstances for those teachers will apply to all the rest of the elementary teachers.
Madam Chair,
Superintendent?
just to reiterate, there has to be a standard from which you apply this. Otherwise, no one's coming to work in a pandemic. There has to be a standard. We're following the same standard all other districts follow. There's a process. It's a legal process. You have to have a reason not to come in. It can't just be, I don't want to come in.
So will the rest of the elementary teachers be held to the same standards as the kindergarten teachers are currently?
Of course.
The
Okay.
standard is being applied across the board.
Okay, that's good to know. And my second
Chair?
question, my second question is, Ms. Cotton actually brought up earlier, and it was a good point regarding the testing. So I think this question should be for Mr. Hennius. Is there any way we can approve this, but make it a prerequisite that all teachers and students have to get tested, or all personnel and students would have to get tested before they enter the schools?
There's no legal basis for requiring students to be tested prior to entering. As far as staff goes, I've seen some districts that have done MOAs with their various employees. I'm not familiar with anyone that would be just random testing or testing prior to coming in, but I have seen requirements that teachers be tested. And if in fact they contract COVID-19, that they be tested and show a negative test prior to coming back to the school.
How about colleges though? Because I know, for example, URI, like they're able to request that all students test, like it's mandatory. So
Colleges and K-12 are completely different, Mr. Cornell. Different legal standards.
Okay, thank you for answering that question.
Madam Chair, I have one more question.
Mr. Testa?
Thank you. And I don't know if this is to Dr. Thornton or Ms. Danbrook. If this passes tonight and it starts to get implemented, does this impact Welk too?
No, it would not impact Welk.
Okay, so the Welk students that haven't gone back yet, they wouldn't go back under this scenario?
I'll refer to Dr. Conley, but it's not in my plan.
I'm sorry, I should have realized that. That should have been Dr. Conley. Okay.
Here she is.
My initial understanding was that they were part of the air purifier order, and I would need a little bit of time to speak to Ms. Danbrook and Dr. Thornton about the plan for Welk.
Okay. Yeah, just a question, because that popped into my head and I didn't realize that we didn't address it. That's fine. Just let us know. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from anyone? Any? There being none, I think I would like to hold the action until later in this meeting and move on to discussion action number 2, hybrid reopening of grade 6 at Veterans Memorial Middle School.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we discussed last week, we do have some space at Veterans. Ms. McCaffrey did do some work on that. We want to share our best thinking on veterans in that space with grade 6. Ms. McCaffrey?
Madam Chair, members of the school committee, Dr. Thornton. Last week, we reported to you that we had 369 students in the 6th grade, that we had 22 classroom spaces available at Warwick Veterans, and that we would be able to accommodate a hybrid instruction to those students. Since that time, I've worked with the administrative team at Warwick Veterans. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank Troy Sylvia, Ryan McDonald, Melissa Centracchio, and Guidance Chair Brenda Resendes for all their hard work this past week. We're looking at establishing stable pods, staggered arrivals and dismissals, We also surveyed the parents, and let me read the questions to you so you can digest the responses. First question was your satisfaction with distance learning, the current distance learning plan, the middle level. 69.8% of the respondents were very satisfied with the distance learning that's taking place at the middle level at Warwick Veterans for the 6th grade students. As of 7/12 today, we had 199 responses, which is a 54% response rate. 30.2% weren't satisfied with the distance learning plan at this point. The next question that was asked was, my child will be in attendance for in-person instruction at Warwick Veterans Middle School. Note, in completing the survey, please know your child's schedule may change as a result of returning to in-person instruction. Also, there may not be bus transportation at this time. And we had a response rate of approximately 63% that would send their kids back to Warwick Veterans based on the survey, and that was a 54% response rate. I think both responses are encouraging. It's saying the parents seem to be satisfied with the distance learning plan. Also, that parents are interested in getting their children back into the classroom. And looking at the distance learning plan that we established for stable pods, we would have lunches in the classroom, we would have scheduled bathroom breaks, and we would have, as I said previously, staggered dismissals. They would be in the 900 wing and the D wing down that you're familiar with. It's the wings that are closest to Station 3, Fire Station 3, off of Albert Street next to Warwick Veterans. Space would fit. I believe we have a good plan established. The team's been working hard. And we have a quality space to support in-person instruction. Are there any questions?
Any questions, folks?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Cornell?
So, so I was speaking with the superintendent earlier today, and he said that the air purifiers wouldn't arrive for secondary, which would include 6th grade, until early December. Is that correct, Dr. Thornton?
Yes, on or about December 4th was our last reported delivery of the second batch, but the conversation now at Veterans, you have one of our 3 buildings that we are occupying right now. Certainly Purifiers enhance the conversation, but that's, as you know, is one of our buildings that we are opening now.
Okay, so yeah, one big difference from the elementary vote and this vote is that, like, with elementary, like, it would phase into the air purifiers being implemented. Well, if we approve this, for example, if it's the 6th graders start in October, then it will be about 2 months before they will be able to have air purifier classrooms. But regarding so this proposal, so is this just for vets, or is it including women too?
This would be just for 6th grade at Warwick Veterans Middle School.
And these will be all people who feed before the pandemic into vets, like it'll just be vet students?
Yes.
Okay, I have a huge problem with that. There is no way I can approve sending the vets kids in and not the women 6th graders. It's not fair to the 6th graders at women, and I will say right now, I cannot approve this tonight.
Anyone?
Are there any other questions?
Yeah,
Mr.
Madam
Testa?
Chair, if I may.
Please.
Thank you. Mr. McCaffrey, yeah, let me try that again. I'll try English this time. I get it's only 6th grade at vets. And I'm wondering, you gave us the results of the survey, but what kind of a timetable you're looking at? And I say that because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, integrating at the secondary level is a little bit of a different kettle of fish than at the elementary level from scheduling and all that, right? So I think
Yes.
are there more moving parts on the sixth grade level?
Absolutely. There are more moving parts. We're looking at a projected date of October 27th.
Right. So then I guess, Dr. Thornton, the question I direct to you or to Dr. Connolly, because I think Mr. Cornell's issue about equity is valid. Even though last week I said foot on the gas, and I mean foot on the gas, but there are exceptions to everything. So I'm concerned with once elementaries are moved in, the elementary special ed programs that are in vets would at some point have to be moved back to their home schools, correct? And then if so, what's that time frame look like? And the point I'm trying to lead up to here is if we put the vets sixth graders in vets, and if we had space to put the Windman sixth graders in vets, could we? Is there enough room? And that would presume that the special ed at elementary programs would be moved back to their home schools. Would that provide us with that space?
My answer would be one move kind of leads to another. If you were to approve this first K-5 ramp up, we would then use a team to phase out the elementary self-contained, not all at once, but you're correct. If those were all removed, I would speculate we would have room for another section, be it grade 6 women, be it grade 7 veterans. You have another conversation to have with that space.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to know how my colleagues feel, because I'm not saying that we have to put vets and women at the exact same time. It doesn't have to be that equal, so to speak. But I wouldn't want to put, vets in on the 20th and then, a month later, then women goes in. I would like to have it. Once one happens, then the other thing happens, and then we can get the women kids in relatively short order. Then that I wouldn't have a problem with. So I think,
Madam Chair,
Superintendent?
if you were to approve this K-5 thinking tonight, we'd come back to you at our next meeting with a proposal to phase the elementary self-contains. We'd come back to you with that, our best thinking on that.
Anyone else? Anyone else have any comments, questions, thoughts on this? Going. New business number 3, discussion action, contract award first student transportation, 2020-2021. Mr. Ferrucci.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I've been quiet and listening. It's quite the conversation you've had this evening. We have before you purchase requisitions for both our regular ed transportation and our special ed. I've been trumpeting this one for the last month that our current configuration of 29 buses at the regular ed level and opening up schools and the requirements that COVID is putting on us, looking at having to add another 14 buses. We've known about this since the task force. The task force has a hybrid and a full in-person plan in order to accommodate the students riding on buses. We were looking at adding about $1.4 million. We have this before you tonight, and Ms. Machado is here to answer the specifics of the details of transportation in the district. And I gotta commend her for the pressure that she's been under trying to figure out how to make this thing work. And also realizing that there's a commitment of buses to accommodate the career and tech and the non-publics that are throughout the community, and the concentration of the special ed at vets that impacts our ability to be able to support the elementaries. That's why you're hearing the non-guaranteeing of busing until we can get all the kids coming back. The way they're stretched out around the city, it's really created some problems. But in following the task force plan, which they analyzed the situation for over 3 weeks before they developed the plan back in July, they did factor in the increased ridership from the 22, I believe it was at the time, up to the 36. We did get communication from state leadership that is a guideline in which to work under. She is proposing that as long as the COVID restrictions are in place, the walking distance would have to be extended even further to be able to accommodate the ridership with the fleet that we have. We also have to report that 14 buses that we're looking for currently do not have bus drivers. The redeployment of drivers to the state contract, and most importantly, the lack of drivers willing to get out on the road given the COVID concerns that they personally have, has really diminished the number of drivers available. DEM being closed over the course of the summer and not providing the licensing procedures that were in place really hampered their ability to recruit drivers. So what we're asking for tonight is the authorization on the busing with the full knowledge that if we continue to delay bringing students back, those will be cost savings that we will have, that I will report out once we get the buses rolling. So we're looking at doing a year-end projection in November. So tonight's would be a commitment to encumber the funds so we can make the necessary plans. And as the bus drivers become available, we can get ready to roll those routes out. But I'll get back to you in November to say, once we get the routes going, whether there's cost savings because the buses hadn't run. I came to you 2 months ago with a conversation that First Student was looking at rewriting their contract and wanting some kind of compensation for making sure that we had buses and drivers and coming up with a payment even though trips weren't run. I can tell you tonight that we've had no further conversation. So our proposal before you is strictly going to be, if a bus runs, we'll pay for it. And if it doesn't run, we're not going to pay for it. So that's what's on the table before you. Ms. Machado, is there anything you wanted to bring forward before we ask for questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. So we're here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Tesla, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrucci, at last week's meeting, we talked about the state's original guidance said 22 to a bus, I think, 1 student per seat. And then they kind of said, well, you could use 36, but they never really solidified that. Has that changed?
We did get clarification and confirmation in writing that it's 36. The best practice they did say, though, is that in order to accommodate that level, because you got to realize that we're talking about 24 seats on a bus with 3 students per seat for a 72 passenger capacity, that to achieve a 36, that means 12 seats will have 2 students in it.
Yep.
And the question that Ms. Machado presented to me that I don't have an answer for is, it makes sense if they're siblings or household where they live in the same household. But if we're going to schedule buses with 36 students and we don't have 12 students that live in the same households, who gets identified as the one that sits in the seat adjacent to another student when we're having other students sit 1 per seat? So it is a really good question. So the guidance was it's preferable to go to 24, but to get anywhere near the population we need to move, she's working under a 36. And we don't have an answer for identification other than probably solicitation of the students. Would you prefer to sit on the same seat with your friend and see how that kind of plays out when we first get started?
Okay, did we petition parents to see if they'd be willing to opt out? Did we do that?
I know.
So we did that for the vet special ed program. We had that as part of the survey. It was successful, but not as successful as I think most people assume that people are opting out. If transportation is available, parents are going to take advantage of it, which, is a good thing for me. So we did also do that for the career and tech program. Again, a lot of students didn't even opt out of the program itself, which is a credit to the CTC and what they do. So currently we're transporting 240 special education students throughout. That includes WELC, that includes Sergeant Rehab, Briggs, those programs, and 320 for the CTC. We're also currently transporting about 500 non-publics. The non-publics, we hope that next year we can start implementing a sign up or an opting out. We didn't have that information as soon as we wanted to this year with everything going on. But we do offer that, and with these grades coming in, and hopefully with the addition of the buses that we're requesting today, we will have an opt-out survey going to the parents.
Okay. I would, is it safe to assume that the populations that vets, the special ed populations, that it's probably difficult for those parents to opt out? It's probably more difficult for those parents to opt out than the non-special ed student who happens to, doesn't need any special anything, right?
Right.
So that's why I think it probably behooves us to do that again. And so the 14 buses, Mr. Ferrucci, we haven't budgeted for those, right?
That's correct. We have not.
And that's going to be what, 14 at about 80 grand or 85 a pop is
It's close to $90,000 per bus. Yes. What we've got budgeted versus the purchase orders on the table tonight is about a $1.3 million cost increase. The task force had said 1.4. The extra 100,000 is the additional fuel. So they're right within those ranges that they were talking about going as early as July. We have targeted the CARES federal funding for acquisition of hardware type of purchases, not operational costs. The most recent $1.7 million actually has to be spent by December 31st, so there's not any relief and even offsetting the busing issue. So between that and the additional staffing, the district is moving forward to bring back the students, even without commitments of funding those budgets that we had articulated as early as July 15th. So it's been on the table. Everybody in this community knows that we were looking at significant costs, and there's been no significant additional funds coming forward from the state or federal government at this point.
Okay. And then if we approve these buses, we still change the walking distances, right? So
yes,
we're still running fewer buses than we ran last year.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
But I get on a positive note, when we announced last school committee meeting that we would be seeking community support, even those who are further away than the walking distances, whether they were willing to make accommodations and give up their seat, quote unquote, for the help of the community. I actually have gotten emails from parents saying they're interested in doing that. So once we establish the schedule, we'll be reaching out for those parents to say, are you prepared to opt out? We'd appreciate it. And that will impact how we actually create our schedules and where the pickup points will be.
Okay, thank you. I mean, to me, I think, I would support this. I'm not a big fan of deficit spending, but I mean, this is necessary, I think. It's just as necessary as if Dr. Connolly needs PPE and there's no money. Money is an obstacle when it comes to PPE. So
yeah,
we'll figure it out later. Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Cornell?
So in regards to opting out, we probably will get less people opting out for this, but I think we should still do it. Like, it doesn't hurt to try. And also, so Mr. Ferrucci, have you gotten any help from the National Guard for this? Because I remember the governor saying that she would supply buses for this.
Neither RIPTA nor the National Guard has any kind of capacity with equipment or personnel for transportation.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, so I guess we're on our own with this. That's good to know.
The only relief I believe we received was the acknowledgement of increasing the capacity on the buses from that 22 to the 36.
I see. Thank you.
Ferrucci, I see that we have less regular ed buses, but we have 4 additional special ed buses. So we're at 81 buses instead of 97 where we were in the past.
That's correct. The special ed is strictly a function of both the COVID impact and also the length of our drives. So even if we have 6 students or 7 students on a bus, to pick up the additional students to make the capacity, would it be another 20, 25 minutes added to a run that's already 30 or 40 minutes, which is putting us way past an hour of travel time for students? And the districts had a position of no more than 45-minute travel times for the special ed students. We've had it impact their ability to be engaged in schools when we've gotten to schools if they've been on the bus over an hour. So I would defer to Dr. Connolly, but she's fully familiar with the length of drives on special ed buses impacting student performance.
But be that as it may, it's my understanding that for a student is having trouble getting qualified bus drivers,
That's correct.
things of that sort.
Yes.
So where is it? Do we have a guarantee that they'll find people?
No. No, right now, tonight, we're just getting the authorization. So that's the targets that we're moving towards. And as they become available, we will bring them in. But there's a limit. There is a deficit of bus drivers, and there's clearly a challenge on equipment at the special ed busing level. That one we've identified early on in the practice, and we typically cannot put special ed bus students on regular ed buses. The 14 on the regular ed is because we had an inventory so large last year that it's sitting in the yard someplace because they haven't, rerouted all of those. So that's just a driver issue. But since we were 34, 35 special ed buses historically, bumping that up before the COVID regulations is turning into a real problem because they just physically don't have the buses, which has been said 3 months ago that it takes them 6 to 8 months to buy new buses from manufacturers. And so that was an identified problem that still exists.
Thank you. Before we do anything further, wouldn't it be good to ask if people are willing to opt out so we have a better idea of what our need is?
I can get back to you. Again, we're not committing this dollar value to first student. We're still controlling the inventory, and it's not impacting our budgetary decisions as to what to do. That decision point will come in November. So once we're on the road and we know what our actual fleet size has to be or what we can actually do, I'll be back to you to probably do a change order to reflect our year-end projection based on what's really transpiring.
Thank you, Mr. Palucci. Does anyone else have any questions with regard to busing? Any questions with regard to busing? There being none, we'll move to number 4, discussion action, COVID-19 substitute teacher rate of pay. Superintendent?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Will you be coming back to that or will you be voting?
Vote.
We'll be coming back to them all. I want people to know, want everybody to know what's going on globally because these all impact each other.
Madam Chair, the next item is Ms. Ruggieri.
Ms. Ruggieri, I'm sorry.
Good evening. So you may remember that we came before you in July and requested that we raise our sub rate up to $125 for the first 30 days for teachers. At the time, we thought that that was a competitive rate and that we were going to be able to attract more applicants. And as we found out, we would get people placed into positions. They would then notify us that they were hired by another district and they would leave us. So that brought us to survey a few other districts to see what they were paying their substitutes. And we found out that the district that was paying the highest was $225 a day for a certified teacher. So I am proposing a tiered approach. I would propose that we could start our certified teachers at $225 per day, and after 10 days, increase them to $250 a day. Rides requirements for substitute teachers is a bachelor's degree for day-to-day subbing. So my other tier of sub pay, I'm proposing for just a bachelor's degree level sub, $150 per day, increased it to $175 a day. I do want to mention that we have applied for a grant through the Department of Education. There is no guarantee that we'll get this, and if we do, the funds are only through December 30th. So I just wanted to make that clear that this would have to come out of our existing budget if we don't get any of those funds from the state. I know we talked earlier about using the teachers with medical accommodations for subbing, which absolutely, if it works out and we have the number of students that we can accommodate that, absolutely we'll do that. We need to work closely with Ms. Danbrook and Ms. Amelot to determine the groupings and what classes and how many students are distance learning before we can make those promises to anyone. Again, that it takes some time. We need to find out what students are actually returning and what the plans are before we can make those promises. But that doesn't answer the questions for the teachers that are out for maternity leave and surgery and, you know, out for just a COVID symptom. Like, we would still need those day-to-day subs, even if we were able to use all of our teachers that have requested accommodations. So I just am proposing that we consider raising our rates to remain competitive, hoping that we can retain some people and get some permanent building subs in our buildings so that we keep our stable pods. And if we can get one person or two people committed to each building, we will be in better shape as far as not having to close classrooms should a teacher call in sick and we're unable to secure a sub. So if we can get these people committed to us, I think it would do the community well to be able to know that there's coverage in the room should their teacher need to quarantine, has a sniffle and needs to stay home, or for whatever reason. So I ask you to consider that. And then the next agenda item is actually something more for the future. I know it's not in our budget for this year, but a topic to consider for our next budget season is to start a permanent substitute pool where we would hire teachers at step and benefits, and they would almost like a float pool in a hospital, but they would be our employees. So we wouldn't lose them to other districts throughout the year. And we would have people on hand at all times for, you know, the long-term surgeries and maternity leaves and things like that. I just wanted to plant that seed, and we can have the conversation further as we come up to budget prep for next year.
Good idea.
Madam Chair?
Superintendent.
On number 4, just if you watch the news, you're seeing other stories where, you know, high schools can't open, right? Other schools can't find subs. Subs are a commodity now more than ever that are really, really hard to find. If you were to take this action, we'd be very competitive. And that would be my hope that we could attract people to Warwick. But right now, it's getting increasingly difficult. And we can expect, as you can imagine, as we get into the flu season itself, it'll get more difficult. But if you did this, we're really competitive.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions or comments on subs or sub pools or anything like that?
Madam Chair, just one, I guess for Mr. Ferrucci. Do you, if we approve this, do you know what kind of budgetary impact it has, even a rough thumbnail?
Just in rough numbers, if our budget was built based on between $75 and $125 and you're going up $100, you're increasing our sub cost for teacher sides of things in the neighborhood of 60 to 70%. So we're probably staring at about $1/2 to $3/4 million, which again is along the lines of what the task force had talked about. When you look back at the task force plans of having to have subs available because it became critical, where we typically would have taken students and put them in other classes if a teacher happened to be out, where now we couldn't do that for mixing pods. So we have to have a body in a classroom. So yeah, it's going to be a significant number. Again, I'm hoping that with us opening in October, that we might have some data to be able to come up with some kind of projection in November to see how serious a hole it is.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Cobden.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to follow up on that. With regards to, because it's COVID and we might be put in a situation where we're in desperate need for many subs, as other districts are showing, and if we get them and we're spending all this extra money, like you just pointed out, is there any way we can use any of the CARE Act money for that? Because it's actually happening because of COVID?
Well, the $1.7 million, we have targeted a budget of about a 1.6. There's about $100,000 that has not been specifically targeted. So that would be the first piece that we could go after. But we're also waiting, as you heard earlier, the PPEs. If the PPE experiences that it's being consumed much more quickly than we talked about, it won't take us but 1 or 2 more orders to buy $100,000 worth of more PPE, and it would be burned up. So, you know, it's just going to be a balancing act of which one takes place first.
Right, okay.
But clearly, by
Maybe we'll
December
actually get
31st,
some more funds at some point.
yeah, that's what.
We gotta hope, you know? Thank you.
Now, is Mr. Oliver here? Superintendent, is Mr. Oliver here?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. It was my understanding that he bought significant numbers of PPE, or was trying to, and cleaning solutions, gloves, masks, etc. Is it different than what Dr. Conley has bought?
Madam Chair.
Acquired?
Can answer that?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Oliver focused on ordering the cleaning supplies that would be needed for the buildings and the PPE that would be needed for the custodial staff. I focused on ordering the PPE that would be needed for nurses and teachers, primarily special education teachers and the WELC teachers, because these are the students that are less likely to wear masks, more likely to, you know, struggle with social distancing. When we look at, you know, your typical elementary, middle, or high school classroom, the need for PPE isn't great, but, you know, we do have a supply available. So yes, it was a different order.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Are you
welcome.
familiar with inverted face shields?
No.
Okay.
And I don't think
literature on that. Any other questions? There being none, we'll go back and we'll start to take the votes. The new business number 1, action on hybrid reopening of kindergarten through grade 5 per the guidelines that Ms. Danbrook provided to us. I move the hybrid reopening of kindergarten through grade 5 as amended by Ms. Danbrook today. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is that 5?
Yep.
5-0, motion passes. Thank you. Number 2, action on hybrid reopening of grade 6 at Veterans Middle School. I move that we reopen under hybrid for grade 6 at Vets Middle School. Do we have a second?
Second.
All
Madam
in
Chair,
favor?
I have a question too for a discussion piece.
Certainly.
Sorry. Thank you. I want to move this. I do want to reserve the right for the committee to just revisit the timetable. And the reason I say that is because, Mr. McCaffrey, as you know, I mean, if we're going towards the end of October, I think the quarter ends on mid-November. So, you know what I mean? It could be we very well decide, okay, we push that date out a little bit, coincided with the end of the quarter. I'm thinking for teachers and scheduling, it may be. So I have no problem doing this. So I would just approve it, and we can always change the timeline later, right, Mr. Hennius? Is that okay? Approve it as is, and then we can always.
That's correct. You need a motion and an agenda item at a future meeting to change the time frame.
Okay, Thank you. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair?
Ms. Cobden? And then Mr. Cornell.
Mr. Cornell spoke first.
Oh, okay, Mr. Cornell.
Yeah, so I believe Superintendent Thornton recommended that we hold this till the monthly meeting because to get more information, that's what was my understanding.
You can certainly do this on October 13th, I believe. If you want to do that, we can certainly come back to you with that at that point in time.
Or we can do it this evening and amend it as necessary.
Yes.
And it's one less thing on the docket for next week's meeting. Ms. Cobden?
Yes, as long as we can amend it, because honestly, I would like to see how it goes with, K through 5 before we start opening everything more up. That's just my opinion.
Do we want to amend it now to start 6 in November, or do we want to keep it where it's at?
Madam Chair, I wouldn't recommend amending it now. I would prefer to have administration come back to us and give us the pro and the con, right? Moving it on the original date or extending it, what good and the bad things are about each one. It gives them a little bit of time to do that, so.
And perhaps at the same time, the Ms. McCaffrey and folks in the administration, perhaps you can explore other places in the district that may be appropriate for grade 6 at Windman. If there's a place that would be safe for and had good airflow and clean and things like that, so that we could get both 6th grades back. So we have a motion on the table. It's been seconded for the hybrid reopening of grade 6 at Vets Middle School. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays?
Nay.
Is this with the amendment?
No, this is with the ability to amend if needed.
I'll vote for that, yes.
Okay. So motion passes 4-1. Mr. Cornell opposes the reopening at this time.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just for a record, I oppose this because it does not include women. That's why I oppose this today.
I understand that, and I think, just so you know, we just asked the administration to look into this further to determine if there is, and of course, this can be amended if necessary. So we understand. We understand your point there. Okay. Number 3, move approval of contract award for student transportation for 2021 as proposed. If it comes to that,
Are you making the motion, Madam Chair?
yes.
All right, second.
Any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it, 5-0. Discussion action, COVID-19 substitute teacher rate of pay. I move approval to increase the substitute teacher rate of pay per that explained by Ms. Ruggieri.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Have it, 5-0. And the potential substitute option is, I think, grist for the mill and something to think about for next year. I think it's a wonderful idea and certainly support it. Is there anything further? Our next meeting of the Warwick School Committee is Tuesday, 13 October, 2020. Executive session will start at 5:30. We will try to open open session at 7 or thereabouts. Mr. Testa, do we have a meeting tomorrow or has that been canceled?
No, we cancel it. I'm still in New York. I'm not
That's
home.
right. Well, I could have run it. But the Achievement Committee, Subcommittee is canceled. And I think that's it. So at this time, I would move that we adjourn for the evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Guys have it 5-0. Thank you very much for your attention. I know this was a lot this evening, and thank you to all the public who watched. And thank you for your support. Be well and stay safe. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.